Chapter 155. The manor of Jiming Marquis was as peaceful as usual. No matter what happened outside, it was always a peaceful place. Ning Chen did not allow any conspiracy to disturb the manor, especially the backyard. There was not much time left in the 1-month period given by Prince Yan. Fortunately, the chess pieces that needed to be set were almost all set, and it was time to finalize the game. This fight between the two kings was actually a farce. The one controlling it was Fan Lingyue, and the one watching the show was also Fan Lingyue. He was powerless to stop it, and could only use the smallest price to end it. It was still the same statement. Whoever became the emperor had nothing to do with him. Marquis, Eunuch Pei has sent a letter. A low voice rang out from outside the study. Send it in, Ning Chen said calmly. Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, the letter turned into a streak of light and flew into the room. However, he didn't enter the room and continued to wait in front of the door. Ning Chen took the letter. After reading it, he said indifferently, "All right, you may leave. There's no need to keep an eye on Eunuch Pei." Yes. The black shadow left and disappeared in the blink of an eye. It seemed like Duke Xiu thought highly of him, and would only be at ease if he died. The night was intoxicating. The lights in the study were still on, but the person had already disappeared. In the palace of the Great Xia dynasty, a black shadow entered under the cover of the night. The patrolling imperial guards passed by, but they did not notice anything unusual. In the Weiyang Palace, Qing Ning, who had rested after a tiring day, suddenly opened her eyes. She sat up and asked alertly, "Who is it?" "It's me," said Ning Chen. He entered in a flash and took off the ghost mask. "Why are you here at this time?" Qing Ning asked helplessly, as she leaned against the bed in her thin pajamas and covered herself with the blanket. This brat really didn't know that men and women should keep their distance. How could he barge into a woman's room in the middle of the night? "I can't get in during the day," Ning Chen said honestly. "If there's something you need, go find Her Highness." "What are you here for?" Qing Ning said unhappily. "It's too late. It's not convenient," Ning Chen said embarrassed. Qing Ning felt like punching someone. After taking a few deep breaths, Qing Ning suppressed the impulse in her body and said, "Her ladyship has already done what you asked her to do. However, neither she nor I understand what you're planning. Why do you want to pretend that the 10th prince will ascend to the throne? This is not an illusion." Ning Chen's expression turned solemn as he spoke slowly. Qing Ning was stunned when she heard this. She did not know what was going on. "If I don't force the 10th prince into a corner, Duke Xiu's side will remain silent. Only a silent dog bites." "I don't want to be bitten at the last moment," said Ning Chen calmly. "You're saying that Duke Xiu isn't sincere in helping the 10th prince ascend the throne?" Qing Ning asked with a solemn expression. "I only suspected it before, but now I can confirm it," Ning Chen said seriously. "By the way, the 3rd prince already has the idea of using military force to force the abdication. He might take action very soon." "This is rebellion." Qing Ning's expression changed and she said angrily. Ning Chen smiled but didn't say anything. Since ancient times, the winner was king, and the loser was always in the wrong. He wasn't surprised that the 3rd prince would choose this path. The 3rd prince's personality was one that liked to use small to gain big things. Moreover, this time, under the circumstances of a sudden attack, the success rate was much higher than expected. That's still not right. The 3rd prince doesn't have enough soldiers, and the 4 city gates aren't under his control. Even if you could mobilize soldiers, you wouldn't be able to enter. Qing Ning shook her head. "Marquis Nangong is one of his people." Ning Chen smiled. Qing Ning was shocked. How could this be? When the 3rd prince had been crowned king, Marquis Nangong had spoken out against it. It was no secret that the two of them didn't get along. No one would believe that Marquis Nangong was one of the 3rd prince's people. "I'm leaving. If the 3rd prince really wants to force the abdication, I'll send a letter in advance." With that, Ning Chen put on ghost face and got up to leave. "How did you obtain the 3rd prince's trust?" Qing Ning hurriedly asked. "Heh." Ning Chen laughed calmly, and then his feet moved as he instantly vanished. Hearing this faint laugh, Qing Ning didn't know why, but an indescribable feeling of foreboding arose in her heart. The changes in the situation these days had caused everyone to place their attention on the Empress. However, the true source of this was the Grand Tutor's sudden change of heart. Everyone in the world thought that it was Duke Xiu's silver tongue, and the fabricated news of the third prince colluding with Northern Meng. However, they didn't know that the true evidence had already been sent to the Grand Tutor. The Grand Tutor was just putting on a show. The crux of the entire matter was how Ning Chun obtained the third prince's trust. If he didn't say anything, no one would know. Ning Chun returned to the Marquis residence and looked at the Marquis uniform that he hadn't worn since he was made a Marquis. The stone-green robe was embroidered with 9 five-clawed pythons, symbolizing his noble status as an official. It was finally time to wear this court uniform. On the second day, the third prince sent a trusted aide to send a message, ordering him to go to Guming and Luoha cities outside the imperial city in 3 days to mobilize troops. These 2 cities were the imperial city's defense cities. The total number of troops, there was only 100,000. They weren't far from the imperial city, so one night was enough. The Divine Wind, Swift Rain, and Violet Lightning battalions were as calm as before. However, deep within the eyes of the 3 battalions' commanders, there was much more worry. Forcing the third prince to abdicate meant rebellion. It was a crime punishable by 9 familial exterminations. Although the plan seemed flawless, they couldn't help but worry. On the 4th day, Xiazi ordered someone to deliver the ink sword. Ning Chun looked at the sword that had accompanied him through half a year of trials and hardships. He sighed in his heart. It had made it in time for this battle. On the 5th day, which was also the last day, Ning Chun went to see Xia Yanwu. Xia Yanwu was standing in front of the main hall of the prince's mansion. His eyes looked through the barrier in the direction of the imperial palace. His eyes flashed with passion and arrogance. Marquis Jiming, at dawn tomorrow, the dragon throne in the heavenly mandate palace will have a new master. Yes, it's time to end it, Ning Chun said with a sigh. Ning Chun left to mobilize troops in Guming and Luoha. At the same time, a beautiful figure in green walked out of Weiyang Palace and also left. 100 miles outside the city, the 2 met, and then went south together. After seeing Ning Chun and the Marquis Jiming's commander's seal, the 2 city lords immediately knelt down to greet the Marquis Jiming. As the sun set in the west, the army set out and rushed towards the imperial city in the north. Ning Chun handed the commander's seal to Qing Ning. He glanced at the 3 generals in front of him intentionally or unintentionally. He didn't deliberately lower his voice and said slowly, "Take the commander's seal and stay here. If you find anything strange, kill them all without mercy." "Yes," Qing Ning nodded in agreement. The 3 generals broke out in a cold sweat. This Jiming Marquis really was as vicious and merciless as the rumors said. In the next moment, Ning Chun's figure flashed and transformed into a streak of light, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Within the imperial city, the Divine Wind was sent out. The entire city was terrified. The Swift Rain Battalion and the Violet Lightning Battalion also moved and quickly took control of the entire imperial city. The 4,000 soldiers of the Swift Rain Battalion surrounded the 10th prince's estate, ready to attack at any moment. Outside King Haowu's estate, there were also soldiers of the Violet Lightning Battalion surrounding it. At this moment, all the people in the imperial city, who held military power, were unable to move a single step. They were all trapped within their mansions. Hearing the commotion outside, the gates of the imperial palace immediately closed and went into a defensive state. Within Weiyang Palace, an imperial guard captain blocked Zhang Xuan's path out of the palace, unwilling to give in at all. "Empress, please forgive us. The Marquis said that no accident can happen to your safety. He told me to stop you no matter what," said the imperial guard captain respectfully. This was the imperial guard captain, who came back alive from the Buddha kingdom. After seeing the commander's seal of the Dragon Guard in Ning Chun's hand, he accepted this task without hesitation. In the world, if there was anyone who still completely trusted Ning Chun, it would be those soldiers who had witnessed the tragic battle of the Buddha kingdom. They were not surprised that the third prince rebelled, but it was impossible for their marquis to do so. In front of the heavenly mandate palace, Ning Chun returned with his sword on his back and walked step by step to the top of the stone steps. The 9,000 dragon guards knelt down to the Marquis, and also to the Supreme Commander's seal of the Dragon Guard. There was a gap between the Imperial Guards. If the 30,000 dragon guards were the elite of the Imperial Guards, then the 9,000 soldiers in front of him were the elite of the elite. Ning Chen stood in front of the Heavenly Mandate Palace and only said 2 words, "Hold your ground." Outside the first Meridian Gate, the tightly closed gates of the Imperial Palace blocked the path of the Divine Wind Battalion. The spies that were originally arranged did not move at all. Xia Yinwu's expression gradually became serious. He sensed that something was wrong. In the Imperial City, the 10th Prince, who was supposed to be in his residence, appeared unexpectedly and led the Blue Sparrow and White Tiger battalions to surround the Swift Rain Battalion. On the other side, Xia Ziyi appeared and led the 2 battalions in his hands to surround the Purple Lightning Battalion. Sensing that something was wrong, Marquis Nangong wanted to lead his troops to help, but was blocked by Duke Shiyu and Eunuch Pei. The red-robed, blue-robed, and red-robed guards of the Taisher Council all walked out and stood behind Duke Shiyu. There were nearly 10,000 of them. The Taisher Council was still the Taisher Council of Duke Shiyu. The head of the eunuchs still had absolute control. Marquis Nangong was in a difficult position and did not dare to act rashly. He was not afraid of the tricolor guards of the Taisher Council, but he was afraid of the old man beside the Taisher Council. The rebellion in the Imperial City was quickly brought under control. Bad news reached Xia Yinwu's ears one by one, causing the 3rd Prince of the Great Xia to look more and more unsightly. If he still did not know that he had been schemed against, he would be a fool. But who was the one who betrayed him? Figures flashed through Xia Yinwu's mind, but when it came to Ning Chen he paused. After thinking about it, he shook his head. It couldn't have been him. The night wind was somewhat chilly. Xia Yinwu glanced to the south and sternly said, "Hold on. As long as we wait for the army to arrive, we will still have a chance." "You won't have a chance." Xia Ziyi, dressed in purple, strode forward, his black hair blowing in the wind. The autumn water sword in his hand was dripping with blood. The 3 generals followed closely behind him, not daring to overstep. "Surround the Divine Wind Battalion. Kill anyone who resists." "Yes." The order soared into the sky. The 20,000 dragon guards and 30,000 Xuanwu army soldiers that had been waiting for this moment moved out, their banners flying as they surrounded the Divine Wind Battalion. Rumble! The gates opened at noon, and 9,000 of the most elite dragon guards appeared. The person at the very front wore a blue, 9-python Marquis robe that flapped in the wind. Chapter 156. When Xia Yinwu saw Ning Chen, he calmed down after a brief moment of shock. He didn't feel any fear or panic, only insufferably arrogance. "Jiming Marquis, I really didn't expect it to be you." "It's not strange," said Ning Chen. Xia Yinwu glanced at the horizon. "It's almost daybreak. Having someone to accompany me to hell isn't a bad thing. You go first. If you're not in a rush, you can wait for me," said Ning Chen. "Of course I'll wait." Xia Yinwu laughed. No one present understood what the 2 of them were talking about, including Xia Ziyi. Perhaps going to hell together was the best ending for the 2 of them. "I'll leave this place to you," said Ning Chen. "Yes." Xia Ziyi nodded. Ning Chen left, leaving the final battlefield to the 2 princes. After Ning Chen left, Xia Ziyi looked at Xia Yinwu, who was still as arrogant as ever. A trace of sadness flashed through his eyes. "Yinwu, you've gone the wrong way. Being born in this cruel imperial palace is a mistake. If I don't fight, I'll die. The most heartless thing is the imperial family. The winner takes all." "That has never changed," said Xia Yinwu. "Did you really have some secret contact with Beimeng?" asked Xia Ziyi, suppressing his emotions. "Yes." Xia Yinwu nodded. At this point, there was nothing to hide. Hearing Xia Yinwu personally admit it, Xia Ziyi's expression turned cold. Killing intent appeared on his face. "As a prince of the Grand Xia, are you worthy of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and Duke Jingwu's trust? Why bother with trifles when it comes to accomplishing great things? However, there's no point in saying anything now. Let's fight." Xia Yinwu took a step forward, his golden armor clanging. Although he had already lost, he wasn't someone who would give up easily. Even if he died, he would die in battle. Xia Zi slowly raised his sword and sighed. Among us 4 brothers, 10th brother is the best at enduring. 8th brother is good at reading people's hearts. As for 3rd brother, your martial strength is ranked first. Today will be the last time I'll fight with you. Xia Zi unsheathed his sword. His purple robes fluttered in the wind. Xia Zi did not use any extreme moves, nor did he release any shocking aura. However, the heavens and earth seemed to have sensed it and trembled. Xia Yinwu's expression did not change. His aura rose as he took a step forward. His golden armor clanged as his iron fists met the autumn water sword head-on. Clang! Sparks flew in all directions as the autumn water sword vibrated. Xia Yinwu did not retreat even half a step. He let out a light shout and activated his martial arts. The heavy and vigorous aura on his iron fist pressed down as he ruthlessly punched towards Xia Zi. Not bad. Xia Zi narrowed his eyes and loosened his grip. His sword spun around and turned into a beam of light that descended from the sky. The sword light flourished and pierced through Xia Yinwu's head. Boom! The ground between the two of them was unable to withstand the immense force, and it cracked open. Dust and sand flew into the air, and cracks spread out for hundreds of feet. At the same time, the sword came down. Xia Yinwu wanted to dodge, but he found that his right fist was restrained, and he could not move, moving the mountains and rivers. At this critical moment, Xia Yinwu did not panic at all. He flipped his other hand and gathered his qi, sending out a red wave that pushed Xia Zi back a couple of steps. Above him, the autumn water sword was also sent flying by this shocking aura. The life and death crisis disappeared in an instant. Xia Yinwu, you really have fallen. Xia Zi took half a step back and softly said. The Grand Xia's prince had actually cultivated the technique of Northern Meng's lover. How lamentable. Xia Zi didn't know whether it was hatred or disappointment, but a trace of loneliness flashed through his eyes. Was it worth it for the position of emperor? Big brother, do you know what I hate the most about you? It's your hypocritical attitude and expression. Xia Yinwu revealed a mocking expression. There's no need to lecture me. Since I've already taken this step, I'm already mentally prepared. Today life and death will be decided by the heavens. Xia Yinwu no longer held back since he had already probed Xia Zi. He exerted force with his foot, causing the stone floor to shatter. A tyrannical aura suddenly soared, and a scarlet light reflected off his golden armor. Sighing, Xia Zi put away the last of his sorrow and softness. He clenched his fist, and the autumn water sword flew back. His black hair fluttered behind him, and a boundless righteous aura surged out. The golden scroll opened behind him, and the large golden words blossomed with a dazzling light. This was the Confucian school's secret art, Boundless Sea of Learning, Ancient Gods Martial Arts Demonstration. Xia Yinwu's fists trembled as he stomped his foot. Immediately, an ancient aura surged out, and a huge statue appeared. It had a green face and fangs, and it looked ferocious. The moment it appeared, a berserk pressure surged out, causing space to shatter and the entire world to violently tremble. Outside the battle, the 3 generals felt the boundless evil aura that suddenly appeared, and they were shocked. They looked at the first prince with deep worry. The soldiers who were further away didn't know what was happening, but they could still feel the terrifying pressure coming from the front. A battle of this level wasn't something they could handle. Boundless Sea of Learning versus Ancient Gods Martial Arts Demonstration. After a loud explosion, both sides were pushed back. Although they were on par with each other in terms of moves, it couldn't hide the difference in their foundations. Oh Hong, who was mentioned by Xia Yinwu, was pushed back dozens of steps before stabilizing herself. On the other side, Xia Zi's aura was slightly chaotic, but he didn't seem to be injured. After taking 3 steps back, he slashed apart the aftershock with his sword and refused to take another step back. Half-step Xiantian. Xia Yinwu's expression greatly changed. This was the first time he was shocked since the start of the battle. The 4 kings all had their own strengths. Although the first prince was extraordinary in every aspect, he didn't stand out in any particular aspect. Gradually, everyone began to acknowledge him. They were used to it and no longer doubted him. That was because Xia Zi's performance was already very outstanding. Haha, we really were too stupid. Xia Yinwu faced the sky and laughed. Blood flowed down his armor, He was unwilling. His battle intent soared like a raging tide. So what if he was a half-step Xiantian? This was his final battle. Xia Yinwu let out a wild roar and pushed his cultivation to its peak. The surrounding stone slabs floated up, and he was like a burning furnace that rose into the air, emitting a dazzling light. Jingwu Dongyao. With an unshakable battle intent, Xia Yinwu condensed his entire life's cultivation into his strongest move. His martial arts demonstration light surged and surged, illuminating the entire imperial palace. This final move was still the move that Jingwu Duke had taught him. Perhaps in Yinwu King's heart, he had always maintained the most primitive respect for his teacher. Facing Jingwu Duke's famous move, Xia Zi raised the sword in his hand. The sword moved and starlight gathered. Immediately, his cultivation broke through the limits and faintly emitted a Xiantian aura. Starry Sky Crossing. Using the same move as the three dukes, the two princes of the Grand Xia finally chose the best way to resolve their grudges. Originally, the two of them had taken the same master. Although they had different masters, they were both disciples of the three dukes. Since they were young, they had secretly competed against each other. At this moment in a life-or-death situation, the two of them both chose the move taught by the three dukes. It seemed they wanted to use this to resolve their many years of conflict and grudges. Boom, boom, boom. A terrifying sound rang out, and the world lost its color. One could only see space explode, and a figure flew out, smashing into the ground. His body was covered in blood, and even his armor was shattered. PFFF. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, Xia Yinwu knelt down on one knee. Blood flowed down from his body. He tried to stand up several times but failed. His heavily injured body could no longer support his inextinguishable battle intent. You've lost. Xia Zi slowly walked over and indifferently said to Xia Yinwu. Haha. Xia Yinwu bitterly smiled. In the end, he had still underestimated his big brother. So the strongest person under the Xiantian realm wasn't the Jiming Marquis, but Xia Zi. Make your move. Closing his eyes, Xia Yinwu's face didn't show any fear. The winner was king while the loser was a bandit. He had already mentally prepared himself. Time slowly passed, but the expected sword still didn't stab down. Xia Yinwu opened his eyes and looked at his imperial brother. His heart fiercely trembled. In the blink of an eye, his black hair was covered in frost, but the hand holding the sword still didn't stab down. Xia Zi's face was still very calm, without the slightest ripple. Only the strands of hair that were gradually turning white highlighted the sorrow and struggle in his heart. The night wind blew, causing a wisp of white hair to flutter. It was so dazzling that blood dripped down from the corner of Xia Zi's mouth. His cultivation actually became a bit unstable. You can leave. From now on, the Grand Xia will no longer have a Yinwu king. Xia Zi's hand that was holding the sword fell down. In the end, he still couldn't do it. He sighed inwardly and turned around, unwilling to face Xia Yinwu again. First Prince, you've disappointed the department head. At this moment, two hidden figures appeared from the Dragon Guard army. They were glistening with a bloody light and a white light as they simultaneously slashed down. Xia Zi's expression shook. He used his palm to disperse the white light, while simultaneously using his body to block in front of Xia Yinwu. He circulated his cultivation to block the bloody sword light. Bang! A terrifying shockwave erupted. Xia Zi was unwilling to retreat. Despite the blood flowing from his mouth, he still stood firm. No matter how wrong he is, he's still my brother. I'll take responsibility for his mistakes. Xia Zi stood in front of Xia Yinwu, unwilling to move even half a step. The department head wants me to ask you if you can take responsibility for it. In Wugo's eyes turned cold. Xia Zi was silent, unable to answer this question. The department head has ordered that if your highness can't do it, then we'll do it. Today the third prince must die. In Wugo and Kong Yu's figures moved once more. Their swords shone brightly as they joined hands to take Yinwu King's life. Xia Zi blocked them while autumn water blocked their swords. For a moment they were in a deadlock. At this moment, a shocking arrow light suddenly descended. Its terrifying might was something that even the heavens and earth couldn't stop. You can't. Facing this terrifying arrow light, Xia Zi was aghast. He didn't have time to hesitate. his cultivation sword, and a golden pillar of light sword. At this moment, the Grand Xia's vast martial king finally revealed his shocking strength without holding back, and forcibly broke through to the Xiantian realm. A generation's heavenly genius. Yin Wugo and Kong Yu were shocked. But the moment they split up, it was already too late to withdraw their attacks. Breaking through to the Xiantian realm allowed Xia Zi to break free from their entanglement, and once more stand in front of Xia Yinwu. When the arrow light arrived, the golden pillar of light dissipated. The ground beneath Xia Zi's feet caved in. Blood wildly gushed out. But he was still unwilling to retreat. Yinwu, I'll always remember that you are my brother. Xia Zi's back was facing Xia Yinwu. He allowed the blood to dye his clothes red as he softly said, "It's just that you've walked the wrong path and done the wrong thing. However, your big brother will bear the consequences for you." After the arrow light, 2 more sword lights arrived. If he couldn't withdraw them in time, it would become a regret. Xia Yinwu's heart trembled. Tears fell from his eyes like rain. But his body was about to be seriously injured, and he was powerless to do anything. At this moment he came to a standstill. Scenes of the past constantly appeared in his mind. Being born in the imperial palace, the person he saw the most was neither his father nor his mother. Instead, he saw his brothers who had grown up with him. Ever since he was a child, Xia Zi had always been like a little adult protecting them. Every time he was punished by his father, it was always Xia Zi who would speak up for them and plead for leniency for them. "Big brother." After calling out one last time, Xia Yinwu no longer hesitated and slapped his Qi Si. Ha! His Qi Si exploded, and his body was instantly filled with energy. His heavy injuries were temporarily suppressed. With a clear whistle, Xia Yinwu's figure flickered and arrived between Xia Zi and Tai Li. He turned his head and faintly smiled before exploding. Blood and flesh splattered all over the sky. Yinwu! The shockwave from the explosion blocked the 2 sword lights. The shocking power sent the 3 of them flying dozens of meters away. Xia Zi looked at the blood and bones that filled the sky. His heart trembled and tears silently fell. Puffed! Blood sprayed out and dyed the ground red. Xia Zi faced the sky and laughed wildly, tears falling like rain. Chapter 157. The third prince lost. He lost completely. He lost tragically. He lost so badly that he couldn't even compare to the flesh and blood that was falling from the sky. The conspiracy and the supreme throne disappeared overnight. Xia Zi's mouth was stained with blood. He smiled sadly with tears in his eyes. In the night wind, his white hair was faintly visible. How many innocents were involved in the struggle for the throne? How many soldiers were killed? Now that he thought about it, it was just a bubble. Yin Wugo and Kong Yu left. Yinwu Wang self-destructed. This was the best ending. The rebellion in the imperial city was quickly suppressed. Xia Yinwu, who spent his whole life fighting for the throne, couldn't even enter the palace. It was really ironic. At this moment, miserable screams sounded in the imperial city. Bei Meng borrowed the third prince's wings, and the martial artists hidden in the imperial city began to move. The nobles on the side of the 10th prince, and Duke Xiyu, began to be assassinated one after another. Even the commanders of the Blue Sparrow Battalion and the White Tiger Battalion were caught off guard by the sudden sneak attack. 3 died and 2 were injured. Ning Chen stood on top of the pagoda in the imperial city. Hearing the screams, he took out the Death Destroyer bow and shot an arrow. The bright silver arrow pierced through the sky and reached the courtyard of the Marquis of Xiaoyi. The expressions of the Bei Meng experts who didn't have time to retreat changed. When they saw the arrow, it had already pierced through their chests. Blood spurted out, splashing more than 10 feet high. Their eyes were wide open. They died with grievances. The silver arrow came one after another. Every time it appeared, it would take away the life of an assassin. However, from the 4th arrow, Ning Chen's mouth began to bleed. Drop by drop, the clothes on his chest were dyed red. Swoosh! Suddenly, an extremely fast white rainbow streaked across the sky. A shocking sword slashed towards the pagoda. With a loud bang, the pagoda collapsed. Ning Chen, who was already prepared, dodged the sword. However, he was still knocked back more than 20 feet. His blood splattered on the ground. Mu Qingxue, Ning Chun looked at the elegant and beautiful figure in the sky, and after a short moment of shock, he quickly returned to normal. Mu Qingxue didn't intend to use the second sword. His figure flashed and disappeared. Mingyu was taken away. She didn't even have time to say goodbye. In the imperial city, as long as Prince Yin didn't make a move, no one could stop Mu Qingxue, who cultivated the travel scroll. Unfortunately, the Yin prince would not interfere in these matters. Ning Chun coughed twice. He took one last look at the direction that the two of them had disappeared in. Soon after, he withdrew his mind and walked towards the direction of the Lingyan Pavilion. Tonight, he must settle all his troubles at once. Under the night sky, the man covered in blood walked forward step by step, coughing up blood from time to time. It was obvious that he was nearing the end of his life. The life scroll was a mental cultivation method that paid the most attention to one's foundation. Even so, it couldn't withstand the wear and tear of repeated life and death battles. Ever since he returned from the Buddhist kingdom, Ning Chen's body hadn't been well. He had relied on his peerless foundation and the power of elixirs to survive until now. There was a limit to a person's strength. This was all he could do. As for the outcome, it was up to the will of the heavens. He had never believed in the heavens, but in the end, it was still the heavens above his head that wanted to take him away. Secretary, Yin Wugo and Kong Yu rushed over. When they saw Ning Chen covered in blood, they were shocked and immediately went forward. You don't have to follow me. Just do what I told you to do. Ning Chen's footsteps didn't stop, and he coughed as he spoke calmly. Yes. A hint of hesitation flashed in their eyes, but they still nodded in agreement. In the Tylee department, there were 13 red-clothed people, 600 green-clothed people, and 8,000 blue-clothed people. Ning Chen had been the secretary for a month. It wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. The Tylee department was still the Tylee department of Duke Xiyu, but there was always the shadow of the Marquis of Jiming. No one could completely control these nearly 10,000 people, not even Duke Xiyu. In the heavenly mandate hall of the imperial palace, the 3 dukes and the 10th prince had arrived. The officials of the imperial court also rushed over one after another. Due to the turmoil in the imperial city and the assassins from northern Meng, many important officials had died. In addition, most of the rebellious officials on the 3rd prince's side had been arrested. Now there were only a few people left in the heavenly mandate hall, less than 30% of the usual number. Old eunuch Pei walked to the side of the dragon throne. Looking at the empty dragon throne, his old eyes were gloomy. The officials didn't say anything about old eunuch Pei's actions. He was a genuine Xiantian expert, and no one could afford to offend him. Grand Secretary, it's time to announce the decision of the 3 dukes. A white-haired old official walked out and said in a trembling voice. After the old official spoke, the other officials turned their gazes toward the Grand Advisor. Tonight's upheaval had come so suddenly. So many people had died and so much blood had been shed. Not only were the people of the royal palace terrified, but even the officials in court were uneasy. The current Great Xia needed a new emperor to stabilize the hearts of the people. There was no suspense about the choice of the new emperor. The 3rd prince had died. The 1st prince had withdrawn from the competition for a long time, and the other princes weren't capable. The only candidate for the throne was the 10th prince. Duke Jingwu remained silent. From the moment Xia Yinwu mobilized his troops, he hadn't said a word. Duke Shi was also very quiet. He waved his feather fan and didn't say a word. The Grand Secretary was waiting. He wanted to wait for the Marquis of Jiming to come and witness this final moment. Unfortunately, he didn't come. The greatest contributor still hadn't appeared. The Grand Secretary had no choice but to give up waiting and announce the decision of the 3 dukes. The officials knelt down to listen to the edict. When they heard the word Xia Mingtian at the end of the decision, they all heaved a sigh of relief. It was finally over. From the beginning when the 4 dukes were fighting for the throne, to tonight's rebellion by the 3rd prince, this battle for the throne had finally come to an end. The 10th prince's mouth curved in a smile. Under everyone's gaze, he walked step by step towards the throne. Imperial City Lingyan Pavilion. Ning Chen had also arrived. His body was covered in blood, and his tired eyes were filled with killing intent. When Su Fian and Qiulan saw Ning Chen, they were startled. They didn't understand what was going on. Jiming Marquis, why have you come? Su Fian felt that the atmosphere wasn't right. To kill. Ning Chen replied. As soon as he said this, the snow began to fall. His ink sword slashed across the sky. 5 months of flying snow. Qiulan pulled out her sword to block, but was directly sent flying. The difference in foundation and cultivation was too great. She was completely unable to participate in the battle. This time, Ning Chen didn't hide his moves like last time. He immediately used his killing intent. The power was completely different. Su Fian saw that the situation wasn't right. The 3 strings of the spring lightning in her hands moved together. A purple light instantly lit up. When the 2 swords collided, Su Fian retreated 3 steps. She was slightly at a disadvantage. Jiming Marquis, what is the meaning of this? Su Fian's face was filled with anger. Tonight, everything had gone according to plan. The 3rd prince had raised an army, and then was suppressed by the 3 dukes, the 10th prince and the 1st prince. Now it was almost time to announce the 10th prince's ascension. Why was the Jiming Marquis here? The Hushi dynasty has already been destroyed for 1,000 years. They shouldn't be stirring up trouble again, Ning Chen said calmly. Su Fian's expression changed. How did he know? The Heavenly Mandate Palace should also have a result. Duke Xiyu is finished. Ning Chen glanced at the palace in the distance. Hearing this, Su Fian's heart sank to the bottom. She moved her feet, and was about to rush over. Ning Chen held his sword, and a sword light flashed, blocking her path. He said, even if you rush over now, it will be too late. Tonight, everything will end. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, the 10th prince walked step by step to the throne of the Xia dynasty. He immediately turned around and slowly sat down. The officials bowed and the sound of "Long live" echoed throughout the Heavenly Mandate Palace. Everyone rise. Xia Mingri opened his mouth and spoke for the first time since he became the emperor. Before he could finish, Eunuch Pei, who was beside the dragon throne, sighed softly. Wrong. The word wrong was so sudden that no one could react. They saw that the hand that had once sheltered Emperor Xia from the wind and rain was imprinted on the 10th prince's chest with a bang. Blood spurted out. The sudden change shocked everyone, including the 3 dukes below. The next moment, everyone came back to their senses. However, an even more shocking scene occurred. The 10th prince, who was sitting on the dragon throne, his bones and face rapidly changed. In the blink of an eye, he returned to his original appearance. Xiyu, the expression of the Grand Advisor, Duke Jingwu, changed drastically in shock. That day the plan was finalized. The 10th prince and Ning Chen met, and decided on the final match of the day. What do you want to say first? Ning Chen asked. Announce that the Jiming Marquis has an audience, Xia Mingri said with a smile. Ning Chen nodded and remembered this sentence. There were only 3 people in the world who knew this sentence: Ning Chen, Xia Mingri, and Eunuch Pei. Duke Xiyu was a very careful person. Her actions were watertight. Ning Chen and Xia Mingri could not find anything that could be used against her. However, no matter how cunning Duke Xiyu was, her ultimate goal could not escape from the throne. Ning Chen had set up tonight's game to push the 10th prince onto the throne in order to lure out the mastermind behind the scenes. He did not need to think too much. It was enough to keep an eye on the dragon throne. Eunuch Pei was the key to this plan. At this last moment, only Eunuch Pei standing beside the dragon throne would not arouse any suspicion. Eunuch Pei had been in this position for 20 years. No matter when he returned, no one would dare to have any objections. The 2 princes did not have Xiantian masters. It was not the first time they had asked Eunuch Pei to come out of the mausoleum. Unfortunately, they had all failed. At this time, Ning Chen went to the imperial mausoleum and returned with minor injuries. This reminded many people in the imperial city. The Marquis Jiming's strength was not much weaker than Xiantian masters. Later, Eunuch Pei was secretly asked to come out, but no one knew who he was. Of course, Ning Chen was an exception. This was because when he was in the stone chamber, he had already told Eunuch Pei to ignore the invitations of other people, except for the 10th prince and Duke Xiyu. The game of the past was the result of today's game. The person on the throne said the wrong thing and lost the whole game. Even someone as strong as Duke Xiyu could not resist the full power of an Xiantian master's palm. The Xiantian true qi destroyed her meridians instantly. A pool of blood stained the dragon robe on her chest. Beside Duke Jingwu, Yin Maxiao, who had always been using the appearance of Duke Xiyu, was the first to recover. He stomped his feet and rushed out of the heavenly mandate palace. He reacted quickly without hesitation. He did not even look at the figure on the dragon throne. No one cared whether he was ruthless or decisive. The moment he turned around, no one cared. At this moment, the last glimmer of hope appeared in Duke Xiyu's dim eyes. She used up her remaining strength and shouted, "Take the princess away." Chapter 158. Eunuch Pei did not chase after her. Instead, he grabbed Duke Xiyu and threw her to the ground. In his eyes, as long as she was not of Emperor Xiao's bloodline, no one had the right to sit on this seat. The Grand Advisor reacted and quickly walked to Duke Xiyu. After checking, he found that she had already lost her breath. The Grand Advisor felt pain in his heart. They had been in the same hall for 40 years, but he did not expect that today would happen. "I will go save the 10th prince." Duke Jingwu turned and left, unwilling to stay here any longer. The officials were at a loss, not knowing if they should leave or stay. Eunuch Pei stood beside the dragon throne, waiting for Ning Chen to come and fulfill his promise. In the Lingyan pavilion, purple thunder roared. Su Fian raised her hand and plucked the 4 strings, causing the stone floor to crack. Once again, the spring thunder's peerless power appeared. 4 strings cry, purple thunder frightens the gods. The roaring thunder roared and destroyed everything in its path, dyeing half of the sky purple. However, facing Ning Chen, who was stronger, the purple thunder dissipated in the sky. The ink sword condensed into frost, and the world seemed to have died. "Miss Run!" Xiulan risked her heavily injured body to block Ning Chen. At the same time, 3 ninth ranks appeared in the Lingyan pavilion, blocking Ning Chen's path. "Do you think you can escape?" Ning Chen moved, sending 4 people flying with one palm. His sword was merciless as it swept forward. The ink sword pierced through the body, causing blood to splatter everywhere. The 4th ninth rank appeared and blocked the sword for Su Fian. Looking back one last time, he had no regrets. "Princess Run!" Blood flowed from his chest. Even someone as strong as a 9th rank was so weak at this moment. After a short pause, the other 3 ninth ranks stepped forward again, disregarding their lives to fight for a chance of survival for their princess. Tears flashed in Su Fian's eyes. She took a step forward and turned to leave. Ning Chen snorted coldly and activated his martial arts. Frost surged, and his sword shook off the 3 people in front of him. The gap between them was as strong as the distance. The 3 could not block the final dazzling light of the Marquis. They flew back with blood and crashed onto the ground. The broken death bow was drawn, and a silver arrow shone between heaven and earth. A moment later, it broke through the air. Su Fei Yan's body trembled. She could feel the killing intent behind her back, but it was already too late to dodge. At this moment, a powerful palm energy swept over and collided with the arrow with a loud bang, forcefully shifting the arrow's trajectory to the right by 3 inches. In the next moment, the arrow pierced through his shoulder, bringing with it a bright flower of blood. "Go!" Yin Maxiao grabbed the injured Su Fian. His figure flashed and he quickly left. Ning Chen was just about to give chase when he suddenly staggered and vomited a mouthful of blood, and his breathing became chaotic. "Secretary!" Kong Yu rushed over and supported the former, a worried expression on his face. "Have you found the 10th prince?" Ning Chen steadied himself and asked tiredly. "We found it. It's in a secret room in Duke Xiyu's residence. There are 2 rank 9 Deathsworn guarding it." By the time this subordinate and Yin Wugo arrived, the 2 Deathsworn were already dead. Kong Yu replied. Ning Chen nodded his head. The 10th prince's efforts to conceal his strength for so long had not been in vain. Although Xia Mingri's talent in martial arts was not as outstanding as the first prince's, he was not weak either. These princes of the great Xia dynasty were truly blessed by the heavens. "It's all over. Let's go back." Ning Chen looked at the sky and sighed. "Yes." Kang Yu respectfully accepted the order and immediately left. Ning Chun walked alone on the streets step by step, towards the direction of the imperial palace. Now it was time for him to fulfill his promise. The imperial palace was brightly lit. This was a sleepless night. Every palace was as bright as day, and the atmosphere was abnormally solemn. In front of the heavenly mandate palace, the dragon guards lined up from the bottom of the stairs, all the way to the first meridian gate. On the dragon throne, Xia Mingri looked out of the palace with a lonely expression. After removing his disguise, he lost some of his weakness and became more steady. The officials were still in the dark and did not know what was going to happen. They all looked out of the palace, not understanding what was going on. They're here. Beside the dragon throne, Eunuch Pei, who had been holding his breath, had a threatening look in his eyes. His withered body instantly disappeared, and he appeared in front of the heavenly mandate palace. Tap tap. In the distance, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Each step was steady as he slowly walked over. His blood-stained clothes fluttered in the wind, piercing one's heart. Welcome, Marquis. The leader of the dragon guards knelt on the ground and lowered his head. Welcome, Marquis. Along the way, all the imperial guards knelt down and bowed respectfully. Outside the Weiyang Palace, the leader of the imperial guards, who was responsible for the safety of Zhang Sun, also knelt down after hearing the deafening sound. He faced the heavenly mandate palace and lowered his head. Zhang Sun was shocked. Immediately, an extremely ominous premonition arose in her heart. Without another word, she wanted to rush out. Your Highness, the Marquis has ordered that you cannot leave the Weiyang Palace before dawn. The leader of the imperial guards stood in front of Zhang Sun with his arms, unwilling to retreat even half a step. You are rebelling. Zhang Sun was furious and shouted harshly. The leader of the imperial guard's expression did not change. He said, Your Highness, please calm down. After dawn, I will ask for punishment. You can punish me as you wish. You. Zhang Sun was so angry that she could not speak. However, Qing Ning was not by her side, so she could not do anything. In the heavenly mandate palace, Eunuch Pei stood quietly on the 1,000-story stone steps. Looking at the young figure below, a rare look of appreciation flashed in his old eyes. Ning Chun was still in his clean white robes. He had taken off his Marquis robes, which meant that this battle was the fairest. It had nothing to do with identity, only life and death. Do you have any unfulfilled wishes? Eunuch Pei asked calmly. I wish for the world to be at peace and no more wars. Ning Chun replied with a faint smile. Eunuch Pei did not say anything. He could not fulfill this wish. 10th Prince, I hope you can be a good emperor. Ning Chun glanced at the figure on the dragon throne and said lightly. I will. Xia Mingri nodded seriously and promised. Ning Chun looked up to the east and sighed softly. There is not much time. Eunuch Pei, let's set the limit at dawn. Yes. Eunuch Pei agreed. This was enough. At this time, everyone had already seen what was going on. They were all shocked. Your Majesty, the Grand Advisor's expression flashed with uneasiness as he knelt down. No need to say more. It is useless. Xia Mingri sighed and shook his head. We can ask for the Empress, the Grand Advisor said anxiously. There are many dragon guards in front of the Weiyang Palace. Without the commander's seal, no one can enter. Xia Mingri said helplessly. As soon as he finished speaking, the battle in front of the heavenly mandate palace finally began. The acquired stage against the Xiantian stage. Originally, there was no suspense in the battle. However, Ning Chun did not hold back and used all his strength to fight. With 2 scrolls and the unique martial arts of the Zhang Sun family, his power was amazing. Even Eunuch Pei did not dare to be careless. Waves of the east. The torrential river swept through the world. Ning Chun turned his palm, and a blue wave rushed to the sky. It was extremely frightening. Eunuch Pei broke the river with one hand. When he was close to Ning Chun, frost drifted and thousands of sword chi condensed into one, breaking through the air. With a boom, Eunuch Pei retreated half a step. His palm was dripping with blood. On the other side, Ning Chun retreated 30 feet. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, and dyed his clothes red again. Give it your all. I would rather die in your hands than be taken away by God. Ning Chun wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and said seriously, As you wish. Eunuch Pei took half a step forward. The aura around his body rose rapidly. An unusually strong pressure swept through the entire palace. It was extremely frightening. At this moment, all the warriors in the palace felt their bodies become heavy. They could not stand up straight. For the first time, a Xiantian stage warrior with all his strength showed his most terrifying side. Ning Chen smiled brightly. With such a strong opponent in his last battle, he had no regrets. Ning Chen turned his palm and slapped his own energy reserve. Suddenly the blue cyclone exploded. An endless violent aura swept through his body. The two palms collided. In front of the main hall, the stone slabs exploded inch by inch. The aftershock spread out. Large pieces of railings collapsed and fell to the ground. The strength of these two people shocked everyone. It turned out that Xiantian stage warriors were so terrifying. It turned out that the acquired stage fighting against the Xiantian stage was not just a legend. The shocking battle was tragic. The powerful aftershock shattered the ground in front of the Heavenly Mandate Palace. More than half of the 1,000 steps collapsed. Broken stones scattered all over the ground. In the Imperial City, all the warriors above the 5th rank looked in the direction of the Heavenly Mandate Palace from afar. They were so shocked that they could not speak. What happened? In the city, the people who had been frightened all night heard the noise and looked at the palace. They did not understand what was going on. The night gradually faded away. The first light of dawn was about to arrive. The battle in front of the Heavenly Mandate Palace had reached its peak. Ning Chen was covered in blood, but Eunuch Pei was only slightly injured. It was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. However, Ning Chen was not dead. The sky was about to brighten. Eunuch Pei did not want to delay any longer. He stepped forward and flew up. He gathered the chi of heaven and earth in his palms. Suddenly, a huge vortex gathered between heaven and earth. Wind and thunder roared. It was a scene of destruction. Ning Chen's expression did not change. He used the last of his strength. The aura of silver, yellow and blue rose, completely illuminating the night. Below the Xiantian stage, he was the strongest person in the world. In a battle with a Xiantian stage warrior, the last move would determine life and death. 100 miles away from the Imperial City, Qing Ning, who was leading the army, felt the shocking waves in the direction of the palace. Her expression changed. She moved quickly and rushed forward. Boom! There was an unstoppable collision. At the last moment, the light illuminated the whole world. The remnants of the destructive power destroyed the heavens and the earth. In front of the Heavenly Mandate Palace, it was as if it had suffered a catastrophe. There was no place left intact. Duke Taisher and Duke Jingwu joined forces to resist the attack, but they still could not completely resist it. They took a dozen steps back, the corners of their mouths red. The prosperity was gone, and there was a wasteland. Eunuch Pei landed and looked at the figure in front of him. He sighed softly. What a pity. Yes, what a pity. Ning Chen vomited a mouthful of blood. He supported himself with his sword and stood up. Unfortunately, he did not die. Under the first light of dawn, it was so warm and intoxicating. The next moment, the fire of the 9th heaven fell. The warm morning sun gave the most merciless punishment to those who broke the oath. Ugh! With a long cry of pain, Ning Chen's body quickly burned. As a 9th grade warrior, the heavens reached state. How could he make an oath so easily? No! Qing Ning was shocked. She understood everything. Tears fell from her eyes. She could no longer stop. Chapter 159. In front of the Heavenly Mandate Palace, flames came from the 9 heavens and fell on Ning Chen with the first light of dawn after the darkness. Thunder roared in the clear sky. In the eastern sky, the light of the fire was reflected, forming a shocking scene of burning the sky. The figure below was surrounded by heavenly fire. The snowflakes could no longer drift down, and the ink sword could no longer condense frost. A long, painful cry reverberated between heaven and earth. It was the last song of the man in the fire in the world. In the Weiyang Palace, Zhang Sun rushed out of the palace like a madman. The leader of the Imperial Guards did not dare to stop him. He activated his qi and took Zhang Sun back to the Heavenly Mandate Palace. At the same time, outside the Imperial City, A beautiful figure in green flew back at an amazing speed. In just one night, the imperial city was settled. No one knew how much the man in the fire had sacrificed for this night. The third prince of the Xia kingdom was not someone who trusted others easily. In the past, no one could guess how Jiming Marquis gained Xia Yinwu's trust. Today the truth was finally revealed. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, many officials had turned their heads away and did not want to continue watching. At this moment, no matter how many conspiracies and dissatisfaction there were, they were all burned away by the fire in the sky and scattered with the wind. In the imperial city, the people who did not know the truth looked at the horrible scene in the sky and were shocked. Someone shouted, "It's Jiming Marquis. Jiming Marquis has been punished by heaven. Jiming Marquis has been punished by heaven." More voices sounded. One spread to 10, 10 to 100, and it became the truth in the hearts of the people. Jiming Marquis has done so many evil things that he deserves to be punished by heaven. He deserves to be burned to death. That's right. I heard that the family of the Lord of Ying City was slaughtered by the Minister of Justice. Jiming Marquis is the Minister of Justice. He must be the one who gave the order. Fortunately, heaven has eyes and the evil man finally got his retribution. What nonsense are you talking about? When the Lord of Ying City died, Jiming Marquis was not yet the Minister of Justice. That has something to do with him. Otherwise, why would heaven punish him instead of others? That's right. Such sanctimonious hypocrites should be burned alive. The people were ignorant and believed in rumors. Although there were a few sensible people who refuted, this weak rebuttal was quickly drowned out by the sea of curses. Marquis, is it worth it? In the manner of the Marquis of Jiming, the old housekeeper heard the voices outside and cried. These were the people that the Marquis had sacrificed his life to protect. Was it really worth it? In the imperial palace of the barbarian dynasty, a man clutched her chest. Her pretty face suddenly paled. The connection between their hearts was incomparably clear at this moment. The barbarian emperor stood outside, staring at the terrifying phenomenon in the direction of the Grand Xia royal palace. His eyes narrowed. Which Xiantian lord of Grand Xia was undergoing his heavenly fire tribulation? Why would there be such a huge commotion? Your Majesty, the princess has fainted. At this moment, an anxious voice drifted over. The barbarian king's expression changed greatly, and his silhouette flickered, disappearing from sight. In the princess's courtyard, Wild was lying on the bed. Her face was pale, and she was sweating profusely. The barbarian king went up to check, but couldn't find anything strange. What's going on? The barbarian king was extremely anxious. Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, he walked outside and looked at the strange phenomenon in the distance. His heart trembled. It was divine punishment. What had that kid done to provoke the wrath of the heavens? Thunder from the clear sky, heavenly fire descended. The terrifying and shocking phenomenon attracted the attention of the entire world. Everyone looked in the direction of the Grand Xia royal palace in astonishment. In front of the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Zhang Sun and Qing Ning rushed over. They looked at the figure in the flames and felt a sharp pain in their hearts. They rushed over recklessly. Your Highness, no. The ministers were in chaos. The Grand Advisor and Duke Jingwu immediately stepped forward to stop Zhang Sun, not allowing him to take half a step closer. On the other side, Qing Ning rushed into the flames with her body covered in light. Just as she was about to grab Ning Chun, a huge thunderbolt descended from the sky and sent the people who were blocking divine punishment flying. Pfft! Qing Ning fell to the ground and vomited blood. Her blood stained the ground. Don't come over, ugh. The pain of being burned by the heavenly fire made Ning Chun, who had a heart as strong as stone, tremble. His burning body was like a red lotus blooming in the flames. Scenes from the past quickly flashed through Ning Chun's mind. From entering the palace, to escaping from the palace, to being hunted down by Emperor Xia, and finally to last night's game of chess. His life was very short, but he had done everything he could. It was worth it. It was really worth it. Ning Chun, I won't allow you to die. You can't die. Zhang Sun was blocked by the two dukes and could not move forward. He stretched out his hand weakly and said sadly. Qing Ning staggered to her feet and moved forward again. However, divine punishment would not allow anyone to stop it. Lightning descended and sent the former flying again. Eunuch Pei, Ning Chen said with difficulty. Hearing this request, Eunuch Pei sighed softly. His figure flashed and he pointed at Qing Ning, temporarily restraining her. Thank you. That was the last voice in the flames. In the next moment, the flames suddenly rose and completely engulfed him. Not even the heavens can take my sword, servant. At that moment the green sword appeared. Suddenly, the world froze and the burning heavenly fire showed signs of weakening. Boom! Lightning fell from the sky and struck the green sword. The green sword trembled and wailed in the lightning. Prince Yan walked out of the void and grabbed the green sword. He slashed at the sky. With a boom, the sword went against the lightning and froze the 9 heavens, temporarily sealing the path of the heavenly fire. Prince Yan walked into the raging flames and grabbed Ning Chen to disperse the flames around him. However, how could the heavens be disobeyed so easily? Prince Yan was multitasking. The green sword that sealed the sky could not withstand it and was broken by the lightning and heavenly fire. At that moment the thunder was like an ocean. Even someone as strong as Prince Yan could not help but stop. The corners of his mouth turned red. The will of the heavens could not be disobeyed. No matter how strong the current legend of the Xia was, he was only one person. It was difficult for him to stop the heavens and protect Ning Chen's life at the same time. Ha! Prince Yan was furious. His aura sword and 5 swords flew out in a row to block the heavens. In a short moment, Prince Yan pointed his sword at Ning Chen's sea of qi and forcefully activated the life scroll above the latter's cyclone to protect the last bit of life in his body. The 5 swords went against the heavens and supported the last pure land. However, in this world, where the sun shone, the heavens could not avoid the heavens. Boom! Lightning fell again. The lightning mixed with the raging heavenly fire crashed into the 5 swords, creating a terrifying sound. The legend of the Xia dynasty resisted the heavens alone, shocking everyone present. Everyone in the world had guessed that Prince Yan had entered the Khanate realm. However, only today did they know that the legend of the Xia dynasty was so powerful. Ding-ling-ling! Just as Prince Yan was resisting the heavens with all his might, a ghost carriage appeared outside the palace. Ghost Qi filled the air and quickly approached. The imperial guards wanted to stop it, but were directly sent flying. The ghost girl walked out. She was still wearing a red wedding dress and a red veil on her head. Her face could not be seen clearly. Only her red lips were faintly discernible. The ghost girl bowed respectfully and said, "Senior, let me take him to the underworld. The underworld is the only place in the world where the sun does not shine." Prince Yan frowned slightly. After a while he nodded and said, "Lead the way." The ghost girl entered the carriage. Black and white impermanence opened the way. Oxhead and Horseface carried the carriage and rushed towards the north. Prince Yan supported Ning Chen and used the 5 swords to resist the lightning and heavenly fire. The underworld was very far from the imperial city. However, the ghost carriage under the ghost girl was obviously a treasure of the underworld. When rushing at full speed, it was shockingly fast. It was even faster than the average Khanate realm expert. After an hour, the two arrived at the end of the fog forest. The ghost girl made a hand seal, and a blurry gate appeared. The two did not hesitate and immediately walked in. The gate of the underworld closed, and the heavens disappeared. Prince Yan waved his hand, and the 5 swords turned into flowing light and disappeared into the sword rack. "Senior, follow me." The ghost girl got down from the carriage and picked up a red lantern beside her. She walked forward. The road to the underworld was very dark. There was no sunlight here. The only light was the phosphorescence of dead objects. It was very weak and almost invisible. The ghost girl stopped in front of a stone room. She pushed open the stone door and walked in. This was where she lived. Inside the stone room, there were several red lanterns. The ghost girl lit them and then helped Prince Yan put Ning Chen on the bed in the room. After being burned by the heavenly fire, Ning Chen's clothes were still intact. However, the vitality in his body had almost completely withered. In the world, there was no divine medicine that could bring the dead back to life. Prince Yan kept injecting true qi into Ning Chen. However, the effect was not great. The remaining vitality was also quickly dissipating. He could not keep it. The ghost girl stood at the side silently. When the netherworld pearl acted strangely, she rushed over. She did not expect that she would still be too late. In front of the northern Ming camp, Mu Qingxue sent Mingyu back. He looked at the figure in front of the commander's tent and said calmly, "I have repaid the favor that Barren City owes me. Goodbye." "Goodbye." Fan Linghua nodded and replied. This was the final farewell. They would never meet again. Mu Qingxue turned around and left without any hesitation. "Qing Wuyo, send someone to send His Majesty back to the palace," Fan Linghua ordered. "Yes." Qing Wuyo bowed and accepted the order. After Qing Wuyo left, Fan Linghua stood quietly in front of the commander's tent. Her beautiful eyes looked in the direction of the Grand Xia Palace. She could not say whether she was happy or sad. He was indeed a very powerful opponent. If it were her, she would not have been able to handle the situation in Grand Xia better. What a pity. "Men, present." A general quickly walked over and said respectfully, "Order the entire army to head west for 300 miles to Jiaoling City." Fan Linghua said, "Yes." The general accepted the order and left quickly. On this day, the northern Ming army moved out, with 10,000 heavy cavalry as the vanguard and 100,000 iron cavalry behind. With lightning speed, they took down Jiaoling City, which was relatively weak. 8 hours later, the army arrived and completely occupied the city. On this day, many cities in Grand Xia rebelled. The number varied from several hundred to several thousand, all under the banner of the third prince. It was difficult to distinguish the real from the fake. On this day, Grand Xia, which had yet to restore peace, was once again in chaos. Chapter 160. Northern Ming's attack on Jiaoling City was out of everyone's expectations. This was not a very important city, so the defense there was relatively weak. No one could guess the northern Ming advisors' intentions. The rebellions in many cities were both real and fake. When the news of the third prince's failure spread, the various rebels had already fought with the defending army for a few days. The flames of war had spread throughout the entire dynasty, making it even harder for Great Xia to take care of both the front and the back. Within Beichui City, Marquis Taiping and Marquis Bloodclothed were in a dilemma. There were only 70,000 troops in Beichui City. They could defend the city, but if they went out to face the enemy, they would be crushed by the northern Ming cavalry. In the imperial city, after Qing Ning brought back 100,000 troops to help suppress the rebellion, they immediately went up north. Duke Jingwu personally led them to stop northern Ming's attack. After that night, the first prince returned to his residence and did not come out again. Zhang Sun also returned to Weiyang Palace and did not interfere in any court matters. The people who supported Great Xia in the past had all left the stage of history, and Great Xia had entered a new era. After Xia Mingri ascended the throne, he did a huge cleanup of the imperial court. All the officials were replaced. Imperial Court West Hall. Yin Wugo, who had taken off his red robes, looked at the imperial edict in front of him. He was silent and did not say a word. After a long time, Yin Wugo used his blood sword to cut apart a row of red candles on the table. Instantly, 100 feet of red silk was ignited. The fire spread rapidly and crazily. Shang Han, Lord once said that he would give me a different life. Now that he has fulfilled his promise, why can't I be happy? Seeing the burning red silk light up the entire West Hall, Yin Wugo sighed softly. Young master, you have changed. You have something to worry about. Shang Han looked at the young master who had followed him his entire life and said softly, Young master, let's go. Don't let down Lord's good intentions. Okay. The two of them left. A cold wind blew past, increasing the intensity of the fire. The imperial edict on the table fell to the ground and spread open, following which, 13 words slowly appeared. Yin Wugo attempted to assassinate His Majesty. His crime is unforgivable. Death. On the other side, in front of Kongyu, there was also an imperial edict. Red-clothed guard Kongyu, for his meritorious service in quelling the rebellion, is hereby conferred the title of Vice Minister of the Department of Justice, temporarily managing the affairs of the department. Kongyu was obsessed with power, while Yin Wugo was the complete opposite. He had long since grown tired of all of this. Therefore, Ning Chen's arrangements for the two of them were completely different. This was also the last thing he could do for them. With Yin Wugo's retirement and Kong Yu's ascension, the change in the Bureau of Justice was merely a microcosm of the change in the imperial court's regime. The replacement of the old with the new had already become an irreversible fact. After the death of Duke Shiyu, one of the three dukes was missing. However, Xia Mingri never mentioned the matter of conferring the title of duke. Everyone in the world knew who this position was reserved for. Unfortunately, there was no such opportunity. In the imperial court, the scribe became the most difficult person. Regarding the last record of Jiming Marquis, he did not dare to write it down. The three historians had asked the emperor more than once how to write it. However, all the memorials they handed over were like stones thrown into the sea. There was no response. Therefore, the record of Jiming Marquis was only written up to that night when he quelled the rebellion. In the nether underworld, a place that had not seen sunlight for many years, Yanqin Wang and Ghost Girl looked at Ning Chen on the stone bed silently. At the last moment, in order to protect Ning Chen's life, Ghost Girl fed him the Yellow Springs flower, the most poisonous flower in the world. The Yellow Springs flower grew at the bottom of the weak water. After a mortal ate it, their body would gradually rot and enter a state of neither life nor death. It could be said that after eating the Yellow Springs flower, one would neither live nor die. Yanqin Wang used his vital qi day and night to help Ning Chen resist the Yellow Springs flower's poison, temporarily preventing the latter's body from rotting. However, this was not a long-term solution. Is there anything in the world that can cure the Yellow Springs flower's poison? Yanqin Wang asked. No. Ghost Girl shook her head. There was no antidote for the Yellow Springs flower's poison. It was also because of this that it could tyrannically turn a dying person into a state of neither life nor death. Yanqin Wang was silent. After a long time he said, I'm going out for a while. I'll be back soon. Take care of him. Senior, don't worry. Ghost Girl nodded. After Yanqin Wang left, Ghost Girl stood beside the bed. Ghost Qi spread out and surrounded Ning Chen. Strands of the Yellow Springs flower's poison flew out and entered Ghost Girl's mouth. She didn't finish speaking. Although there was nothing in the world that could cure the Yellow Springs flower's poison, there was someone who could. However, Ning Chen was relying on the Yellow Springs flower to hang on to his life. Once the poison was cured, he would die. Half a day later, Yanqin Wang returned with the 9 Wonders flower. Senior, it's useless. Ghost Girl shook her head. The 9 Wonders flower could not regenerate the most important parts, such as the internal organs and the head. In Ning Chen's current situation, all his internal organs had been heavily damaged by the heavenly flame. If they couldn't be healed, he could only rely on the Yellow Springs flower to hang on to his life. Yanqin Wang went forward and checked Ning Chen's condition. There was still no improvement. He only had 1 breath left. If I completely release the Yellow Springs flower's power, he can come back to life. But Ghost Girl didn't continue speaking. However, if she did that, Ning Chen really would become a monster that was neither life nor death. Let him wake up and decide for himself. Yanqin Wang sighed and condensed his sword. Vast true qi guided the Yellow Springs flower in Ning Chen's body, quickly releasing its power. At the same time, Ning Chen's body began to show signs of being corroded. Ghost Girl's red lips parted, and she sucked in the excess energy. Yanqin Wang's eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. He continued to help Ning Chen wake up. 15 minutes later, pain flashed across Ning Chen's face. He slowly opened his eyes. They were dark and deathly still. Yanqin Wang stopped and stood to the side, waiting for Ning Chen to wake up. A moment later, Ning Chen came back to his senses. He wanted to move, but he found that apart from his right hand, he couldn't move his entire body. Ning Chen. Yanqin Wang briefly explained what had happened. Then he asked calmly, tell me your choice. Ning Chen was silent for a long time. Yanqin Wang didn't rush him and waited patiently. I choose to live. After a long time, Ning Chen softly said, I choose to live. Even if you become a monster? Asked Yanqin Wang. Yes, Ning Chen said with certainty. I respect your choice. Yin Qin Wang nodded. Then he continued. From now on, you will stay in the underworld. I will try my best to find a cure for you. However, don't have too much hope. Thank you, senior, said Ningchen seriously. Yin Qin Wang left. Ghost Girl picked up the 9 Wonders flower. She thought for a while and asked, Can you give it to me? Take it, Ningchen said casually. Thank you. By the way, do you want to stand up? Asked Ghost Girl. What's the price? Asked Ningchen. Your entire body will rot, replied Ghost Girl. No need. This is good. Ningchen shook his head. Then I'll help you make a wheelchair. Thank you. Ningchen thanked her. Half a day later, Ghost Girl made a simple wheelchair and put Ningchen on it as a means of transportation. Although the Yellow Springs flower's power hadn't been fully released, Ningchen's body inevitably began to show signs of corrosion. Every time this happened, Ghost Girl would help to suck away the excess energy, barely preventing the former from turning into a monster. Ghost Girl, can you help me send a letter? Asked Ningchen softly. If there's someone you're worried about, I can lend you the ghost sedan. You just have to rush back before dawn. No need. They'll be more worried if they see me like this. Ningchen shook his head. Ghost Girl didn't say anything else. Taking advantage of the night, she left the underworld. Ningchen sat in the wheelchair and looked at his cracked and rotting right arm silently. This was the only arm he could move, but it was also the part of his body that was rotting the fastest. So this was what it felt like to live a life worse than death. There was a price to pay for living. This was his choice, and he couldn't blame anyone. In the Great Xia Imperial Palace, the black and white impermanence, Oxhead, and Horseface appeared in the gloomy ghost Qi. The patrolling Imperial guards wanted to stop them, but they were sent flying by a powerful force. There was no disagreement at all, because the ghost lady had no intention of speaking at all. She rushed straight towards the Weiyang Palace. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, an Imperial guard quickly entered to report. When Xia Mingri heard that it was Ghost Girl, he sighed softly and said, No need to stop her. Let her go. The ghost sedan drove into Weiyang Palace. Qing Ning was the first to sense it. Her figure flashed and blocked in front of it. It's you. Qing Ning was shocked and cried out. This is the letter he gave you. In the ghost sedan, Ghost Girl waved her hand, and a stream of light flew out and swept towards Qing Ning. Qing Ning took the letter and hurriedly asked, How is he? Read the letter yourself. As she spoke, the ghost sedan left without any hesitation and disappeared in an instant. Qing Ning opened the letter in her hand. After reading it, tears flowed down unconsciously. Just a few words, extremely simple. I'm still alive. Don't worry. The familiar handwriting was reflected in their tears. The only sentence he had written was already their greatest consolation. Qing Ning came to Zhang Xuan's room, knocked on the door and walked in. The room was very dark with only one candle burning. Zhang Sun sat at the table, looking at the moon-shaped jade pendant in her hand. Her eyes were bloodshot and dim. Clearly, she hadn't slept for several days. Empress, he's still alive. Qing Ning placed the letter in front of Zhang Sun and said softly. Zhang Sun was startled and looked at the handwriting in the letter. After a moment, tears fell like rain. In Barbarian Palace, a man woke up and sat on the bed in a daze. She could feel that he was still alive. Why did her heart still feel so uncomfortable? In the Netherworld Palace, Ghost Girl returned. When she saw Ning Chen's body rotting again, she immediately went forward and absorbed the Netherworld poison into her body. Don't blame me for talking too much. It's impossible for your body to recover. Moreover, as the poison corrodes, you will gradually lose your self-awareness and become a true living dead. Huh? Ning Chen smiled tiredly. It sounds very scary. If that day really comes, just sink me under the weak water so that I don't scare others. Chapter 161. There was no day or night in the underworld. Deathly stillness was an eternal theme. Ever since Ning Chun had woken up, the thing he did the most was sit in his wheelchair in a daze. He couldn't go out or cultivate. The ghost girl had said that the more he used his true qi, the faster the poison would spread. He would be one step closer to becoming an undead monster. Ning Chun was very clear that his internal organs had already been destroyed by the heavenly flames. He was relying on the Yellow Springs flower to survive. Detoxifying the poison would lead to death, but not detoxifying the poison would lead to a life worse than death. The heavens had already blocked all paths of survival, leaving no hope. Only the two of them were left in the underworld. The ghost girl liked silence, and Ningchen didn't like to waste time talking. Thus, the deathly stillness of the underworld became even quieter. After a few more days, Ningchen grew tired of staying here. He began to sit in his wheelchair and walk around the underworld. He didn't have any goals, but he didn't want to sit there and wait for death. The ghost girl didn't have anything to do, so she accompanied Ningchen around the underworld. The two of them were now undead, so what they had the most was time. Ningchen crossed the Ruoshui and entered the main hall of the netherworld. The mechanism in the hall had already been broken, and the pearl that controlled the illusion had also been eaten by the little white horse. Now on the stone platform, there was only a slender demon blade that was completely blood red in color, and a noble and extraordinary purple divine sword left. In the past, he couldn't take away the blade and sword on the platform. Today was no different. The blade and sword were sentient and would automatically recognize a master. Clearly, he wasn't the master they were waiting for. Ningchen wasn't disappointed. This world didn't revolve around him. It was impossible for him to encounter all the good things. He was already lucky to have obtained 2 heavenly tomes. He couldn't ask for more. Ghost girl, you can do your own things. There's no need to follow me. I'll be fine for a while. Ningchen glanced at the red-clothed woman beside him. I don't have anything to do. The ghost girl calmly said. Don't you need to cultivate? Ningchen curiously asked. The upper limit of the underworld child and ghost girl's martial path is the peak of the Hotian realm. Unless they cultivate together, it's very difficult for them to advance. Unbelievable. Ningchen sighed. The ghost girl paused for a moment before continuing. It's not absolute. This generation's underworld child is an anomaly. His talent far surpasses anyone from the previous generation. It's very likely that he'll be able to step into the Xiantian realm on his own. What about you? Ningchen asked. I'm not as good as him. It's almost impossible. The ghost girl shook her head. Give me your hand, Ningchen said softly after thinking for a while. A look of surprise flashed across ghost girl's face, but she still extended her hand. The ghost lady's hands were very white, even whiter than the average woman's. It was not frightening, but rather it was very beautiful. Ningchen grabbed the ghost lady's hand and activated the life scroll in his body. Suddenly, a vast aura flowed into his body through the ghost lady's hand. At the same time, Ningchen's body began to decay, especially his right arm, which was decaying at a shocking speed. Scroll of life. Ghost girl was shocked. However, before she could be surprised, she felt a vast amount of true qi flowing into her body. She could only suppress the shock in her heart and concentrate on receiving the true qi from Ningchen's hand. After a long time, Ningchen retracted his hand and looked at his arm. He pulled up his sleeve and covered his arm. After a quarter of an hour, the ghost woman woke up. She looked at the young man in front of her with a complicated expression and said, recklessly using your true qi will accelerate the spread of the poison in your body. Ningchen smiled and said carelessly, it's fine. This cultivation base of mine is just a waste. Why don't I help you break through to the Xiantian realm? The life scroll did not have any attributes, so anyone could cultivate it. The ghost lady had done him a favor, so this true qi could be considered repaying that favor. Feeling the turbulence in her body, the ghost lady carefully warned, I have to go into seclusion. I don't think I'll be able to come out for a while. I'll leave the ghost palanquin here. If you want to leave, you can sit on it. But remember to come back before dawn. Don't worry, I know what to do, Ningchen replied. The ghost lady did not say anything else, and hurriedly left to enter seclusion. The Xiantian realm was not so easy to reach. However, she had a feeling that even if she did not enter the Xiantian realm this time, she would not be too far off. After the ghost lady left, Ningchen continued to wander around hell. Unknowingly, his originally numb left arm began to feel something. This meant that the Yellow Springs poison in his body had deepened. Just as Ningchen was suffering in the underworld, The outside world was also in chaos. Great Xia and Northern Ming were at war once again. Fan Lingyue led 10,000 heavy cavalry and 100,000 heavy cavalry on a long-distance raid, completely defeating the Great Xia's reinforcements. Even Duke Jingwu was defeated. Less than half of the 100,000 reinforcements remained, and they all retreated back to Yeyang City. The strength of Northern Ming's heavy cavalry was fully displayed this time. In addition to the invincible heavy cavalry, Great Xia's army was defeated again and again, suffering heavy losses. Most of the rebellions had been suppressed, but Great Xia was also in a difficult situation. The people were in a panic, and they no longer had the confidence they had in the past. Within Great Xia's imperial city, there were still many nobles being assassinated. The number of assassins that Northern Ming had hidden with the help of the third prince was far beyond imagination. It was impossible to eliminate them all in a short period of time. The imperial guards of the imperial city underwent a major change, especially the 3 battalions of Divine Wind, Purple Lightning and Swift Rain. Several commanders were replaced. Marquis Nanyu was also placed under house arrest by Xia Mingri, and his military power was taken back. Half a month later, the 5 battalions of Divine Wind, Green Sparrow, White Tiger, Black Tortoise and Crimson Viper moved together. The 150,000 imperial guards left the imperial city and headed north to meet the enemy. The 11 battalions of the imperial guards were only left with 6 battalions, and the pressure of guarding the imperial city increased. In the west of Great Xia, the Eternal Night cult's attacks were even fiercer. The 30,000 heavy cavalry became 50,000. Under the surprise attack, the 100,000 Blackwater army was no match for them and retreated hundreds of miles. In another battle, the Blackwater army was still at a disadvantage. On the other side, the battle between Marquis Kaixien and the Eternal Night Martial Monarch was earth-shattering. Unfortunately, the Eternal Night Martial Monarch had a special physique and was injured but not killed. Even someone as strong as the Great Xia War God was helpless and could only retreat hundreds of miles. The situation of Great Xia had once again reached a critical moment. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Xia Mingri frowned as he looked at the urgent battle reports. His mind was spinning rapidly. That day, Ningchen told him that Great Xia and Northern Ming would definitely fight again. If they couldn't win, they should try their best to drag it out. After autumn, Great Xia would have more than a 90% chance of winning. However, with the current situation, Great Xia probably wouldn't be able to hold on until then. The Northern Ming army came aggressively and bared their fangs. The 100,000 cavalry were invincible, and with the help of 10,000 heavy cavalry, even the imperial guards wouldn't be able to stop them. The soldiers of Great Xia were better at defending cities. Hence, Fan Lingyue tried to reduce the number of times they took the initiative to attack the city. He tried his best to choose the open plains to take the initiative. Great Xia couldn't catch the traces of the Northern Ming cavalry, so it wasn't strange for them to lose again and again. The Northern Ming imperial court was a country on horseback. Every Northern Ming person ate sand and mutton as they grew up. The lives of the people of Great Xia were much better as they lived on grains. There was an old saying that a herbivore would never be able to beat a carnivore. The strength of Great Xia was built on the strength of the marquises and border soldiers. Unfortunately, these soldiers and generals who had been through hundreds of battles were either held back or died in schemes. There weren't many of them left. Fan Lingyue was the best at making use of people's hearts. During the process of the war, he spread rumors that Great Xia was going to fall. The matter of Ningchen being punished by the heavens became the best reason. That day, the sky was clear, and the scene of a sea of fire was still fresh in their minds. The people of Great Xia had no choice but to believe it. The people of Great Xia felt more and more uneasy, afraid that one day, the wrath of the heavens would descend once more. As the saying goes, a defeated army is like a collapsing mountain. The current situation of Great Xia was like a collapsing mountain. They couldn't defend, they couldn't beat, and they couldn't catch up. The invincible Great Xia had no face left under the iron hooves of Fan Lingyue. Another 10 days passed, and the 150,000 guards arrived at the north. They split into two, one to assist Yiyang City, and one to defend Shilling City. They wanted to block the Beimeng army's path down south. These were two iron cities, and in the middle and two sides were natural barriers and city walls. They were the two cities that one had to pass to go down south. If one wanted to go around, one would have to pass through many mountains and hills, which was really disadvantageous for the Beimeng Iron Cavalry. Sieging became their only choice. In the world, everyone was looking at this crucial battle. If Great Xia could hold back the Beimeng army and stop them from going down south, there was still hope for the war between the two dynasties to turn around. If not, Great Xia would really be in danger. Logically speaking, in this battle, Great Xia had the advantage of defending the city and would not be easily broken through. At the very least, they could use up a large portion of Beimeng's forces. At that time, even if the city was broken through, it would be barely acceptable. However, they had Fan Lingyue on the other side, so no one dared to make any predictions about this battle. In just a few short months, the invincible Great Xia was beaten to such a state. The real reason was that Beimeng had Fan Lingyue and Great Xia did not. The true battle was about to begin, and the defending troops of the two cities were really nervous. Yiyang City and Shilling City had 90,000 and 60,000 guards respectively, working together with the defending troops to face this battle together. However, at this moment, the Beimeng Iron Cavalry stopped in a small city 500 miles away. The northern Meng army, which had been left far behind, quickly caught up with them. They brought carriages after carriages of provisions and siege weapons into the small city. In the following few days, the Beimeng army started to try to siege the city. The target they chose was out of everyone's expectations. It was not Shilling City but Yiyang City, which had more troops. The scale of the siege was not large, and it was more of a probing attack. Wave after wave, it was continuous. Everyone knew that this was the strategy of the Beimeng military advisor. However, even if they knew that it was a trap, no one dared to let down their guard, and could only deal with it carefully. Deep into the night, Duke Jingwu stood on top of Yiyang City, looking at the Beimeng army in the distance. He felt really complicated. He had been in the court for 40 years, and had experienced 3 generations of emperors. He had witnessed the entire process of Great Xia, going from prosperity to decline. Today he felt that he was really old. The new generation would replace the old. This era was no longer theirs. Beimeng's military advisor was indeed terrifyingly strong. Great Xia also had such a person, unfortunately. Chapter 162. The ghost palanquin streaked through the night sky, emitting ghost chi. The person in the palanquin was wearing black clothes that only revealed his eyes. His entire body was covered in darkness. The ghost palanquin drove straight to Skyheaven Academy. When it was close, Ningchen put away the palanquin and pushed the wheelchair towards a small courtyard outside the academy. This was Old Man Lu's residence. Normally, no one would come here. Old Man Lu sensed the wheelchair as soon as it entered the courtyard. He opened the door and frowned when he saw the hidden figure. "Who are you?" "Old Man Lu, I trust you've been well since we last met," said Ningchen calmly. His slightly hoarse voice still contained a trace of familiarity from the past. Old Man Lu's body trembled, and he was filled with disbelief. "You're still alive?" "I'm just not dead," said Ningchen softly. "Why are you dressed like this? Why are you so secretive in front of me?" asked Old Man Lu. "You're old. I was afraid of scaring you." Ningchen faintly smiled under the black cloth. Old Man Lu frowned once more. "You can't move your legs again. It's just temporary. I'll recover soon." Ningchen didn't say anything else. According to the current situation, once he could move his legs again, the Yellow Springs flower's poison would have completely spread. He wouldn't be far from becoming a living corpse. "Wait a moment." Old Man Lu walked into the room and then pushed a wheelchair out. "Change to this. After you left last time, I casually made it in my spare time. When I heard that your legs had recovered, I thought you wouldn't need it anymore. I didn't think I'd give it away today. In the end, it's not a waste." Ningchen switched to the wheelchair and tested it out. As expected, it was much stronger than the ghost woman's. Old Man Lu looked at the youth in front of him and asked, You didn't come to the academy just to see an old man like me, right? I came to find my master and also to see you, said Ning Chen honestly. Ning Chen turned the wheelchair around and walked towards the door. I'm leaving. I'll come see you again in the future. Old Lu watched as Ning Chen left. Many questions were buried in his heart, but he didn't say anything. He could feel that Ning Chen was different this time. He was like a pool of stagnant water, and no one could detect any signs of life from him. Ning Chen sat in his wheelchair and walked to the headmaster's residence without any obstruction. The academy was guarded by many powerhouses, and the headmaster was an inborn expert in the three disasters state. It was the safest place in the world, and there was no need for any guards. The headmaster's room was still dimly lit. After Ning Chen arrived, he knocked on the door and waited silently. Come in. The old voice of the headmaster sounded in the room. Ning Chen pushed the door open and entered. He looked at the teacher who stood up to add oil to the lamp, and said respectfully, Teacher. The headmaster stopped and glanced at Ning Chen. Trembling slightly, he passed the oil in his hand to Ning Chen and said, You fill it. I'm old and my hands are not steady. Yes. Ning Chen nodded. He took the lamp oil, opened the wick, and carefully poured the oil into the lamp. It's good to be young. There's hope when you're young. The headmaster sighed softly. Teacher, I can't hold on any longer. Ning Chen said in a low voice. The headmaster smiled and stretched out his arm. After a while, specks of dust scattered. His entire hand began to turn gray from the fingers. Not long after, more than half of it disappeared. Your body still exists. It's just that there are some problems now. There will always be hope. Don't give up so easily. As he spoke, the headmaster's hand moved slightly. The gray fingers began to fly back and condense together in the blink of an eye. Do you still remember what Dao Kuei said to you? The headmaster asked. Live. Live at all costs. Ning Chen replied. The headmaster nodded and walked behind the desk. He tidied up the books on the desk and said, It's not easy to live. However, there's only hope if you live. Ning Chen was silent. After a long time, he bowed deeply and said, I understand. The no scroll is about to appear. Dao Kuei and I are old and don't have the strength to search for it. We can only rely on you. The headmaster sighed softly. I'll do my best. Ning Chen replied respectfully. At this moment, in the southeast direction, a shocking light shot up into the sky. Suddenly, everyone was shocked. It's the heavenly book. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes and said slowly. It felt as vast as the starry sky. The possibility of it being the no scroll was not high. As for which scroll it was hard to tell. Headmaster, I'll go take a look. After speaking, Ning Chen turned his wheelchair and left. After leaving the academy, he drove the ghost palanquin towards the southeast direction of the Xia kingdom. The ghost palanquin was extremely fast. In the darkness of the night, it streaked across with a black brilliance. It was astonishingly fast. This was an important treasure of the underworld. Although its attack power was average, in terms of speed, it surpassed the average Xiantian. Far off in the distance, the flat ground exploded. A giant tomb appeared and split open with a loud bang. Immediately, Yinqi rushed into the sky and dark clouds gathered. Thunder roared crazily and bolts of lightning more than 3 meters thick hacked down. The surrounding earth was blasted open. The shocking scene shocked everyone in all directions and attracted countless gazes. What an eventful time! Some living fossils woke up from their slumber and sighed. Their eyes could no longer remain calm. Right at this moment, the heaven and earth changed again. 100 li away, scorching yang energy gushed out like a heavenly spring, rushing hundreds of zhang high. Another large tomb exploded, and boundless waves of fire descended. This was the void burning, and it was incomparably spectacular. It was as if the entire sky was burning, and this world was going to be incinerated. The appearance of the yin-yang tombs caused a shocking phenomenon. The people who were constantly coming were hesitant, not knowing which one to enter. The heavenly book was definitely in one of the tombs. If they chose the wrong one, it would mean that they would miss the opportunity to get the heavenly book. Nearly 2 hours later, Ning Chen arrived 50 miles away from the Yin tombs. He stopped the palanquin and stopped. The southeast of the Xia kingdom was the place with the most martial sects and ancient martial families. The appearance of the two tombs attracted the attention of many powers. These sects and families had existed for as long as the Xia kingdom had been established. They had once restrained themselves under the invincible might of the Xia kingdom. Now that the world was in chaos, these sects were much more active. Ning Chen sat on the palanquin and came to a high ground. He looked at the scene in the distance and was not in a hurry to enter. These two tombs looked abnormally dangerous. It was not easy to enter. In front of the two tombs, many important figures of the sects and families gathered. They were carrying treasures of their sects and wanted to force their way into the tombs. Ning Chen looked at the situation in front of him from afar and remained silent. The relationship between the imperial court and Jianghu had always been negative. Now that these sects dared to appear so brazenly, it was clear how chaotic the situation in the Xia kingdom was. Throughout the night, the area within several hundred li of the great screen trembled, as if it was about to sink. At dawn, terrifying rays of light rose up from the two great tombs, illuminating the entire sky. Not long after, the supreme elders of the great sects retreated in a sorry state. Their bodies were covered in blood, and their sect-guarding treasures were damaged. They were covered in cracks and had lost their luster. Bang! A waterfall of blood bloomed. 4 unlucky Taishang elders were touched by the flames in the Yang tomb. Their bodies suddenly exploded, and their blood and bones scattered all over the sky. Outside the Yin tomb, a similar situation occurred at the same time. Yin mist filled the air, and bloody broken bones floated in the air. It was truly terrifying. The fire waves and Yin mist that filled the sky mercilessly reaped the lives of the intruders. Only 1 or 2 out of 10 people could enter by luck. After more than 10 people's bodies exploded, the crowd calmed down a little and avoided the Yin and Yang aura that was like the god of death. The situation suddenly reached a stalemate. The Yin wind whistled and the fire waves surged to the sky. The two tombs appeared together, and the undercurrent surged as if it wanted to overturn the sky. Ning Chen had already left for a long time. He must return to the underworld before dawn. Many sects and families suffered heavy casualties and had no choice but to retreat. They temporarily rested in the nearby Yingyu city and waited for the people inside to send news. However, the Taishang elders who entered the two tombs under the protection of their sect's treasures never returned. One day later, the 3 treasures in the Yin tomb cried and exploded. The fragments broke through the bindings and scattered all over the ground. Blood rained down on the tombs. At this point, the tombs fell silent, and there was not a trace of movement. The black crows screeched and cawed irritatingly. In front of the tombs, some people no longer waited and left. However, there were also some who did not give up and kept waiting not far away, waiting for a new variable to appear. Everyone was shocked. It was obvious that the owners of the tombs had left behind an extremely terrifying method before they died. It seemed that they did not want their tombs to be desecrated. The murderous intent was shocking, and they mercilessly wiped out those who attempted to intrude. Ah! A terrifying scream resounded through the wasteland. In the Yin tomb, a bloodstained hand with white bones was pulled out. The Taishang elder of the ancient martial arts Feng family revealed his head with a face full of fear. He struggled to crawl out, but the Yin wind whistled and countless thin black ribbons stretched out from the tombs, mercilessly pulling him back. At this point, there was a deathly stillness. I can't accept this. I was just 1 step away. Just 1 step away. After an unknown period of time, the crazy voice sounded again. A bloody person crawled out. Through the Yin mist, one could barely recognize that it was a Taishang elder of Mountain of No Return. However, a moment later, the bloody person exploded into a rain of blood and scattered in all directions. What happened? Outside the Yin tomb, many onlookers were shocked. They could not help but feel a trace of lingering fear. If they had entered, would they also end up like this? This is a half-step Xiantian from Mountain of No Return. He died just like that. Most people's eyes were filled with disbelief. Normally, these Taishang elders of the great sects that they could only look up to had fallen one after another. It was like a dream. It was too unreal. The vitality is in the Yang tomb. It must be like this. Someone shouted. Everyone was in an uproar. They suddenly realized something and rushed to the other side with all their might. It was a majestic sight. Why? It's all wrong, haha. Another ancient family's supreme elder rushed out, but he immediately exploded. Flesh and blood poured down like rain, and shattered bones flew in all directions. His final roar made everyone tremble with fear. Only no one could hear it anymore. Sinister winds whistled past, and the bloody mist scattered. The ground was dyed in dark red. Outside the Yang tomb, the waves of fire were getting more and more vigorous. The entrance was sealed, and the waves of fire were as silent as before. There was no movement at all. There was a trace of strangeness in the calmness. There were more and more people. At this time, almost everyone's eyes were focused on the Yang tomb. The Yin tomb had become a land of death. Logically speaking, the vitality was in the Yang tomb. Chapter 163. 25 miles away from the Yin Yang tombs, Ningchen appeared once more. Every night for 7 days he would come and watch from afar. In the heavenly tomes, life was the beginning, God was the venerated, nothingness was the end, and chaos was the change. They were the four most special scrolls. The life scroll was the beginning of the heavenly tomes, so it had an extraordinary connection with the other scrolls. After a few days of observation, Ningchen could basically confirm that the heavenly tomes were in the Yin tombs. However, he wasn't in a hurry to take it. The Yin tombs were a land of death. Everyone who entered died. Although it was difficult for him to die, he would still die if his body exploded like those who entered. If you want to take it, I can help you. Ghost woman appeared out of nowhere. Her red wedding dress fluttered in the wind. Have you broken through? Asked Ningchen softly. I'm still half a step away, replied Ghost woman. Ningchen nodded. After thinking for a moment, he extended his hand to her. Give me your hand. Ghost woman gently dodged and shook her head. No need. I want to take the last step myself. Ningchen was silent for a moment before withdrawing his hand. He didn't force her. Do you want to go in? Asked Ghost woman, looking at the two tombs in the distance. Wait a bit longer. It's not time yet, replied Ningchen. Ghost woman took 2 steps forward. Her eyes peered through the red veil as she waited with him. Outside the Yang tomb, there were people trying to enter every day. As for the Yin tomb, after the ominous events a few days ago, very few people dared to take even half a step inside. People were dying in both tombs, but generally speaking, those who were lucky enough to enter the Yang tomb were still 10 to 20% alive. Every once in a while, a grand elder of a large sect would use a secret technique to send a message out, letting people outside know that they were still alive. Do you know where the heavenly tomes are? Asked Ghost woman. The Yin tomb, said Ningchen calmly. Ghost woman looked at the Yin tomb. There was no one there anymore. Those who had entered were all dead. Occasionally, 1 or 2 people would escape, but at the last moment, their bodies would explode without leaving behind a corpse. The 2 of them waited for an entire night. When the sun was about to rise, they left in the ghost sedan chair. While the southeast was changing, the war in the north of Great Xia was also getting more and more intense. The northern Meng army was attacking the city more and more frequently, and both sides started to have fewer soldiers. However, compared to northern Meng, who was attacking the city, Great Xia had the advantage of defending the city and had fewer casualties. This was an expected situation. The Duke of Jingwu and the Marquis of Bloody Robe, who had arrived later, were both famous generals who were good at fighting. Naturally, it was not difficult for them to defend the perilous situation. There was no problem with Bei Meng's military advisor's strategy. If they couldn't take down Yiyang City, it was not something that could be changed by manpower. Great Xia had suffered too much at the hands of the northern Meng military advisor. Hence, no matter what the situation at Yiyang City was, Jingwu Duke and the Marquis of Blood Clothing's strategy was to defend to the death. In the nether underworld, Ningchen was deep in thought. He wasn't thinking about the Yin Yang tombs, but the war in the north. The tomes of arcane were in the Yin tomb, and no one would be able to get it in a short period of time. They just had to wait patiently. The situation in the north really confused him. When Bei Meng attacked the city, Fan Lingyue's strategy was impeccable. In a situation where the disadvantage was obvious, he was still able to maintain a situation of 6-4. However, he kept feeling that something was wrong. Fan Lingyue's current actions were more like a famous general, and not the world's most intelligent person who struck fear in the world. In other words, it was more than perfect, but not amazing enough. The ghost girl came over and looked at the scribbles on the ground. Although she didn't really understand, she understood what Ningchen was thinking. You're already like this, and you still can't let go of these things? The ghost girl opened her mouth and asked, very puzzled. She had witnessed the person in front of her turn from a young man in the prime of his life to his current appearance that was neither human nor ghost. If it was anyone else, they would have already collapsed. How would they have the heart to think about these things? Ningchen casually threw away the withered branch in his hand. He didn't answer and changed the topic, asking, Ghost girl, is your immortal body the same as that of the martial monarch of the Eternal Night cult? Hearing this, the ghost girl shook her head and said, They're not the same. What do you mean? Ningchen asked. The ghost girl thought for a moment, then said, In this world, there is no true immortal body. Although me, underworld child, and the martial monarch are not afraid of blades, swords, or palms, we can still be injured. Ningchen listened carefully and didn't interrupt. This might be the key to dealing with the Eternal Night cult in the future, so he had to remember it carefully. The ghost girl continued. For example, underworld child and I have the ghost origin or underworld origin. In addition to our special martial arts, ordinary injuries can be quickly healed. Even fatal injuries such as heart meridians and internal organs can be healed after a period of time, as long as we meditate. As for the martial monarch of the Eternal Night cult, because he has an upper and lower dantian, when fighting, he can defend and attack. As long as it's not a fatal injury, with the powerful recovery ability of the three-disaster realm, he can fight and recover at the same time. The ghost girl's words gave Ningchen a lot of shock, causing him to once again sink into deep thought. A three-disaster realm expert with an immortal body was a disaster for the Great Xia. Innate was different from nurture. They couldn't be killed by an army. If the Great Xia wanted to obtain the final victory, how to defeat the martial monarch was an unavoidable problem. Of course, it was still a bit early to think about that. Whether or not the Great Xia could defeat Beimeng was still unknown. Just as Ningchen was thinking, the ghost girl hesitated for a moment, then said, Actually, there is another way to solve your body's problem. Ningchen raised his head, astonishment on his face. He asked, What way? Kill the underworld child and seize the underworld origin, the ghost girl slowly said. Ningchen was startled, unable to come back to his senses. If you obtain the underworld origin, you can transform into an underworld body. The poison of the Yellow Springs flower will no longer be a threat. Furthermore, with the underworld origin, your internal organs that have been destroyed by the heavenly flames will quickly recover, the ghost girl explained. Ningchen came back to his senses and frowned. Aren't you and the underworld child the same cultivation? Why are you telling me this? The ghost girl softly sighed. You don't understand. This generation's underworld child is an anomaly. He has lost his mind and gone crazy. He doesn't have any concept of right or wrong. As long as he feels like it, he can do anything. The reason the underworld has fallen to its current state is largely because of his existence. The most terrifying thing is that this person's talent is too terrifying. Once he crosses the threshold of Xiantian, there will be no one in this world who can keep him in check. It's truly lamentable that fellow cultivators aren't of the same mind. Ningchen's expression was complicated. The ghost girl continued. However, once you die, I will still take back the underworld origin. The things of the underworld will still have to return to the underworld. Of course. Ningchen nodded. In the next few days, Ningchen continued to wait outside the Yin Yang tombs every night. Something had also begun to happen to the Yang tomb. Although the people who had entered hadn't died, none of them had been able to leave. They were all trapped inside. Prepare yourselves. It's time for us to go in. On the fourth night, Ningchen looked at the two tombs in the distance. Dao Kuei had taught him a secret art from the Taoist path. In the past, The Taoist path had been the master of formations and restrictions. The secret arts he had learned were mainly cultivation techniques. He had only briefly mentioned formations. So it had taken him 10 days to just barely understand what was going on with the yin-yang tombs. If his guess wasn't wrong, these two tombs were connected by life and death. When the yang tomb was in charge of life, the yin tomb was in charge of death. A few days ago, the yang tomb was in charge of life, while the yin tomb was in charge of death. Now it was about time for that to change. As soon as the words left his mouth, the yang tomb erupted into flames. Screams of death echoed for hundreds of kilometers. The ancient treasures of the great sects flew out and exploded, causing blood and bones to scatter in all directions, covering an area of 10 meters. "I'm out, haha," a supreme elder rushed out. However, before he could even smile, his entire body exploded. Flesh and blood fell like rain as broken bones flew in all directions, causing others to tremble in fear. "I can't accept this. I can't accept this." The yang tomb trembled. Miserable screams rang out one after another, before coming to an abrupt end. Finally, the tragedy began here. Large amounts of blood splattered everywhere, blooming with the final light of life. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. "Let's go." Ning Chun narrowed his eyes as he spoke. Ghost Woman nodded. In the next moment, the palanquin carried the two of them into the yin tomb. In an instant, yin qi filled the sky and engulfed them. The two of them didn't fear it at all. This yin qi was harmful to normal people, but it was useless to these two people whose bodies had long been abnormal. After entering the yin tomb, Ghost Woman put away the palanquin and spread out her spiritual sense to carefully observe the surroundings. The yin tomb was very dark. Yin wind rustled, and the damp walls were covered in years of wind and frost. Sword scars crisscrossed the walls, reflecting the intensity of the battle in the past. Who knew what the tomb's master had set up? Based on the scars on the walls, the two tombs had opened more than once and buried groups of geniuses. "It's been at least 1,000 years. Ning Chun looked at the gray bones on the ground and sighed softly. 1,000 years had passed and countless cultivators had been buried here. It was the same this time. Countless people were like moths flying into a flame, all for the sake of obtaining a lifetime's worth of fortune. Even the slightest glimmer of hope was enough to drive many crazy. The two of them kept walking forward. After an unknown amount of time, Ning Chun's heart suddenly turned cold. He looked up and saw countless gray ghosts floating out of the darkness. The yin wind whistled, and they were densely packed together. It was enough to make one's scalp tingle. "Yin spirits." The ghost girl's pupil shrank. She pulled Ning Chun and immediately opened a path for them. She watched as the rows of ghosts left. Something of extreme yin had finally appeared in this big tomb. It was not a good sign. Wherever the yin spirits passed by, everything ceased to exist. Everything was devoured cleanly. After countless years, these yin ghosts seemed to have developed spiritual intelligence. Their dark green eyes actually began to show traces of spirit. "This tomb is probably more than 1,000 years old. We might be in trouble." Ghost Woman looked at the departing yin spirits and reminded them. Yin spirits couldn't be formed in 1,000 years. If they were unlucky, this could be the tomb of an ancient sage from 10,000 years ago. Chapter 164. The recorded history of this world was not very long, at most 10,000 years. The truly glorious era began 1,000 years ago. As for what this world was like 10,000 years ago, only ancient legacies like the underworld, the Tao sect, and the Eternal Night cult knew. 10,000 years was a long time. Taoism was destroyed, the underworld was defeated, and countless great sects disappeared in the river of time. Not a trace of them was left. Eternal Night sect's strength could only be fully demonstrated at this time. This was a true immortal inheritance with a frightening foundation. Once upon a time, the underworld also controlled the ups and downs of the world. Unfortunately, it declined in the passage of time. The ghost girl carefully observed the surroundings and explained, "It takes a long time for a yin spirit to form. If I'm not wrong, this tomb is very likely the tomb of an ancient sage from 10,000 years ago." Ning Chun knew very little about what happened 10,000 years ago. The secret technique that Dao Kuei gave him did not mention this. Now that the ghost girl mentioned it, he could not help but be curious. What's an ancient sage? Ning Chen asked. It's a supreme expert who has cultivated to the peak of the three disasters realm. 10,000 years ago, such an existence would appear every 1 or 2,000 years. People called them sages. Later on, the peak of the three disasters realm did not appear for a long time, so people called them ancient sages. Now the peak of the three disasters realm has not appeared for 10,000 years. Even this name has gradually been forgotten. The ghost girl answered seriously. Hearing this, Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. If this was true, then it was really troublesome. He did not know how powerful a peak of the three disasters realm was, but he had experienced the power of the three disasters realm. It was not something that could be resisted by humans. Previously, in the Battle of Mijia Mountain, he had used up all his tricks. With the help of the resentment on the blood-veined sword, he had joined hands with Qing Ning, who was in the Khanate realm. In the end, he had used gunpowder and the sand sword lent by Yan Qin Prince to barely suppress the abbot of Dui Temple. However, even so, he had not been able to kill this Buddha in the mortal world. A peak of the three disasters realm was already so terrifying, let alone a peak of the three disasters realm. No wonder no matter how many of the grand elders of the great sects came, they all died. They could not even protect the treasures of their sections. Boom! At this moment, the earth trembled, and the void trembled. The entire tomb shook violently. Obviously, other than them, many great sects and clans had also discovered some clues, and began to join forces to attack the Yin tomb. Under the fierce attacks, strange dark runes appeared in the Yin tomb, flickering in and out of existence, turning all the attacks into nothing. Let's leave quickly, said the ghostly woman under the red veil. Her eyes flashed with light. Yes, Ning Chen replied. Now that the Yin tomb was reborn, there would definitely be people from the aristocratic clans who would be able to barge in. This wasn't good news for them. The two of them moved forward quickly. Along the way, they encountered two more Yin spirits. The second time, they didn't manage to avoid them in time, and caused a lot of trouble. Ghost Lady pushed Ning Chen to the side, and blocked all the Yin spirits on her own. The Yin spirits weren't particularly powerful, but normal attacks were completely ineffective against them. The ghost woman didn't want to waste any time, so she forcibly used her origin ghost flame to burn away hundreds of Yin spirits. After using the origin ghost flame, the ghost woman was a bit tired. She softly reminded Ning Chen, the Yin spirits in the tomb have already matured. You can't use your Zhenqi. Be careful. Ning Chen nodded, his expression grave. The ghost woman's constitution was special, but it was still so difficult for her to deal with these Yin spirits. One could imagine how miserable the grand elders of the great sects had been. The Yin tomb's rebirth wouldn't be long. Once the cycle of life and death changed, this place would definitely become even more terrifying. They had to hurry. The two of them continued forward. After a long time, 7 doors appeared in front of them. 4 of them were already open. It seemed that many people had come here in the past 10,000 years. The stone rooms behind the first 3 doors were empty. Clearly, the items had been taken away. Only the 4th stone room had its door wide open, but the items were still there. Behind the door, the entire stone room was dyed red with blood. The ground was covered in white bones, looking extremely miserable. There was no doubt that the people who had opened this stone room were the grand elders of the great sects, who had entered a few days ago. Unfortunately, they had all died here. It was unknown what terrifying things had happened here. Broken swords, broken cauldrons, broken spears. None of the treasures of the great sects were intact. They had all been destroyed here. It had to be known that some of the most powerful treasures could barely resist a Xiantian expert under the full power of a peak 9th rank expert. Even if their offensive power wasn't enough, they should still be able to protect their lives. There was a medicinal plant in the stone room. It was in the shape of a human, growing among the white bones. Its medicinal fragrance assailed the nostrils. It was extremely extraordinary. A humanoid king medicine. The ghost woman's eyes flashed with shock. Ning Chen glanced at it, but didn't enter. Instead, he walked toward the 7th door. This king medicine wasn't so easy to obtain. Even if the tomb's owner was reborn, if he wanted to take it away, he would have to pay a great price. The grand elders of the great sects would quickly arrive. He couldn't waste time here. Seeing that Ningchen wasn't moved, the ghost woman immediately advised, "This king medicine is useful to you. You can't give it up like this. It's too late. Finding the heavenly tomes is more important." Ningchen continued to walk forward without looking back. Even though he felt that this heavenly tomes was not the supreme scroll, he couldn't jump to conclusions without seeing it with his own eyes. He had promised Dao Kuei that he would do his best to find the void scroll. As long as he was alive, he couldn't go back on his word. The ghost woman glanced at the king medicine, and then at the departing Ningchen. Her figure flashed, and she charged into the stone room. At this time, Ningchen had also arrived in front of the seventh door. He reached out to push it, but as expected it didn't budge. Ningchen didn't take out the black sword from behind his wheelchair. Instead, he activated the life scroll and slashed down. With a loud bang, the door trembled. A 3-meter sword mark appeared, but the door still didn't open. As expected, Ningchen frowned. The marks on the 7 doors were all different. It was clear that every time the Great Tomb appeared, there would always be people trying to open the 7 doors. Although the owner of the Great Tomb wasn't a kind person, he wasn't a ruthless person. In the 9 deaths, there was still a chance of survival. That was why 3 of the doors had already been taken away. According to the marks and the final result, there was a pattern to the opening of the doors. It should be that after the first door was opened, the next door would be opened. The bad news was that no one knew the order of the 7 doors, so they had to try. The good news was that there were only 3 doors left that hadn't been opened yet. The probability was 1 in 3. It seems that someone got here before us. At this time, a devilish figure appeared. The moment he appeared, he gave off a strong pressure. His blue armor shone with a cold and evil light. His handsome face had an emotionless smile. The person who came was an anomaly from hell, Underworld Child. Underworld Child. Ningchen narrowed his eyes. He had never met Underworld Child before. However, there wouldn't be a second person with such an evil and cold aura in this world. Behind Underworld Child, a girl with dim eyes stood there. Although she looked young, the aura on her body was unusually vast. She didn't lose to an upper sky. The aura of the Yellow Springs flower. Pitiful person. Underworld Child looked at the black-clothed figure in front of him. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly. The cold arc made people feel cold all over. Help him free himself. Yes. The girl accepted the order. In the next moment her feet moved. Her figure turned into a white shadow as she slammed her palm down. Boom! The sword and palm collided. Ningchen only felt a huge force coming from his ink sword. He couldn't dissolve it in time, and was immediately pushed back 3 meters. The corner of his mouth was stained with blood. It dripped onto his black clothes. The black clothes and black blood slowly merged together. Ningchen didn't feel much pain. With his current body, it wouldn't be easy to die even if he wanted to. Oh! Underworld Child touched his lips with his finger. The smile on his handsome face grew wider. It was as if he had seen a prey that made him happy. Yu moved again. Her palm was majestic. She came at him again. The ink sword in Ningchen's hand hummed. Frost floated. He met it with his sword. With a loud clang, dust flew around the 2 of them. A crack appeared between the 2 of them. It extended a few meters. At this moment, a red figure flashed across the battlefield. She appeared in front of the 2 of them, and sent Yu flying with a palm. Are you okay? Ghost Girl asked softly. I'm fine. Ningchen shook his head. Yu landed on the ground, and took 3 steps back. The corner of her mouth was red. Her lifeless eyes didn't have the slightest ripple. It was unknown what she felt. What kind of relationship is this? Friendship? Love? Or is it a stupid favor? Underworld Child smiled lightly. Is there a difference to you? Also, you've violated the rules of the underworld again. You're using a living person as a puppet. Ghost Girl said coldly. Underworld Child smiled lightly. Rules are only used by the weak to restrict each other. It's a hypocritical method to prevent the other party from gaining more benefits. Rules have no effect on the strong. Ghost Girl frowned. She glanced at the path they came from. It was a bit strange. It had been so long. Why was there no movement at all? What are you waiting for? Those people who came in? It's a pity that they can't come. Underworld Child said. Ghost Woman's expression changed as she asked. You killed all of them? The weak always have to depend on the strong's mood. Unfortunately, I just happened to be in a bad mood. Underworld Child said indifferently. You're crazy. Ghost Girl suppressed the shock in her heart and mocked. In this world, there's only a fine line between a crazy person and a smart person. But there are too many idiots who think they're smart, and too few who are truly smart. The stupidity of the majority causes the minority to not be recognized. My beloved fellow cultivator, your stupidity makes my heart ache. Underworld Child held his chest with regret. Ningchen was tired of hearing this. The sword in his hand moved, and a dazzling silver light shot towards Underworld Child's chest. There's no point in saying more. Let's see who's the real deal. As you wish. Underworld Child smiled coldly. A blue light flashed from his right hand, and with a clang, it met the tip of the ink sword. Chapter 165. The moment Ning Chen and Underworld Child clashed, Ghost Girl and Yu also stepped forward and started fighting. The battle between the four of them immediately turned incandescent. Every move was merciless and aimed directly at the vital points, full of murderous intent. Facing Underworld Child, Ning Chen could no longer hold back. He unleashed all of his skills. The moment his sword moved, it caused a snowstorm that filled the sky. Both sides had no more leeway. Between the strong moves, there was only an exchange of injuries. Although Ning Chen was not at his peak state, he had 2 heavenly books and an immortal body created by the Yellow Springs flower. He was not at a disadvantage at all. The 4 of them were not normal people. 2 of them were from the underworld. One was a living dead, and the other was a living puppet. Sword moves and palm attacks landed on their bodies, causing blood to splatter. However, it was an even more intense battle. There was no hatred or resentment. Between the 4 of them, it was far from the hatred of life and death. However, every move was fatal and merciless. At this time, there were not many wise. Just like Underworld Child who had lost his mind, any actions that were not accepted by the world might be, because of a momentary thought. Ning Chen would not explain anything. Before confirming whether the heavenly book inside was the Void Scroll, he would not be courteous to anyone. The 4 of them fought fiercely. As the sword and palm clashed, their injuries became more and more serious. However, no one fell. Even if the sword chi penetrated their bodies and the palm attacks pierced their hearts, there was no other injury, except for the blood flowing from the corner of their mouths. Among the 4 of them, Yu was the one with the highest cultivation. She was infinitely close to innate. However, in a real battle, the difference in foundation and experience was gradually revealed. Ning Chen, Ghost Girl, and Underworld Child were undoubtedly the strongest people below innate. Although Yu was not bad, she was still slightly inferior to the 3 of them. When the battle reached the most intense moment, the moment the 4 of them crossed each other, Ghost Girl used her incantation and showed the strange martial arts of the underworld. Ghost Desolation Art, 100 Ghosts Confinement Sky. 100 ghosts appeared, trapping the sky and locking the earth. Yu could not dodge in time, and was trapped by the 100 ghosts. In a short gap, Ghost Girl freed her hand. She raised her palm, and slammed it on Underworld Child's chi. A piece of underworld origin flew out, and was caught by Ning Chen. At the same time, the black sword condensed into frost, and pierced Underworld Child's heart without mercy. The devil cultivator was injured and became even more crazy. He slapped both of them, flew out and vomited blood. Haha! His crazy laughter shook people's hearts. Dark blue flames rose around the Underworld Child's body, forming an extremely strong pressure in the dark space. Ghost Desolation Art, Soul Severing. The Ghost Girl condensed her technique, and cold ghost chi filled the sky. Her slender hand carried the power of 10,000 caddies as it pressed toward the Ghost Girl. With a hong sound, their extreme moves collided. The 2 individuals both took 2 steps back. Their bodies dyed in vermilion. A flying feather, Heaven and earth one sword. In that instant, the sword that was heading straight for him split into 100,000, and the 100,000 condensed into one. It pierced into Underworld Child's heart meridian, through the same wound as before. Blood sprayed out, and dyed the body of the ink sword red. Underworld flames burned the heavens. The burning sky underworld flame rose and spread out with a loud bang. Ning Chun was the first to bear the brunt of it. He was directly sent flying 30 meters away, and black blood splattered all over the ground. The ghost lady was also affected by the nether flame. She retreated a few steps before stabilizing her body. At this moment, the 100 ghosts were engulfed by the underworld flames, and quickly dissipated. Yu escaped and immediately came to Underworld Child's side. Yu, let's go. Underworld Child smiled faintly. With a light step, he disappeared behind the blue flames. Yu followed and disappeared as well. Ning Chun and the ghost lady's expressions were solemn. Even this couldn't kill him. This Underworld Child was truly terrifying. In the next moment, Ning Chun's chest tightened, and he vomited a mouthful of blood. He looked exhausted. The ghost lady immediately went forward. Her vermilion lips parted slightly, and wisps of ghost chi guided the underworld poison from Ning Chun's body into her mouth. It temporarily suppressed the poison that could explode at any time. You can't use your true chi anymore, the ghost lady warned. Although she could cure the underworld flower's poison, there was a limit. Once the underworld flower's poison spread, even a deity would be powerless. Ning Chun nodded and softly agreed. Leave the rest to me. With that, the ghost lady walked in front of one of the doors. She flipped her hand and slammed her palm on the door. A violent vibration sounded. The door shook, but it was still firmly shut. No, it's not that. Ning Chun spoke and reminded. Hearing that, the ghost lady looked at the remaining 2 doors. Under Ning Chun's signal, she walked to the door in the middle. She raised her cultivation to the peak, and the ghost chi in the sky crashed into the door. In the shocking explosion, the door was blasted open. The scene that had been sealed for 10,000 years finally appeared in front of them. Be careful. Ning Chun's expression changed. He slammed his wheelchair and instantly came in front of the ghost lady. He only had time to push her away before he felt his chest sink, and a sharp pain came. The headless horseman's spear pierced through Ning Chun's heart. Black blood spilled out. It was extremely terrifying. In the next moment, 3 more spears slashed down. The yin chi was dense and threatening. Ning Chun ignored the spears in his chest. He condensed his left hand and caught the spear that was slashing down. At the same time, he waved his ink sword and swept away the remaining 2 headless horsemen. The familiar scene made Ning Chun's heart tremble. This time it was not an illusion. That meant that the yin soldiers and headless horsemen he encountered in the underworld had existed before. Things were different now. Ning Chun was no longer the beginner of martial arts. However, facing these headless horsemen, he still felt a heavy pressure. In the stone room, a golden piece of paper floated above the stone platform. It was obviously the heavenly book that the 2 of them were looking for. The 4 headless horsemen cooperated well. Each of them was at the peak of the 9th stage. They firmly blocked the way forward. I'll hold them back. You go and get the heavenly book, Ning Chun said solemnly as he cut the spear in his chest. Be careful, Ghost Woman instructed, and then she took a step forward and flashed out swiftly. The spear was waved in an attempt to block the way forward. However, the ink sword condensed into frost. The sword's power was shocking. It slashed out a huge ravine that was 10 feet long. The ghost lady took the opportunity to charge in. She came before the heavenly book and grabbed it. Retreat! Ning Chun covered the ghost lady and came out. He waved his sword and made a prompt decision. The ghost lady was not a sloppy person. She also sent out a palm and quickly retreated. The sword and palm moved together. With a loud bang, they blocked the 4 headless horsemen's steps. In the blink of an eye, the 2 of them had disappeared without a trace. In the next moment, the ghost palanquin flew through the night sky, quickly heading north. An hour before daybreak, the 2 of them finally returned to the underworld. After Ning Chun returned, he immediately went into seclusion to heal. The ghost lady stood guard at his side, helping to transfer the small piece of nether spring that she had taken from the underworld child into his body. The nether spring was too small. It was less than a fifth of its original size. The underworld child had protected the nether spring within the vortex in his dantian. Although the ghost lady's palm had shattered the nether spring, she had only managed to force out a small piece. 2 days later, Ningchen finally suppressed his injuries. Unfortunately, the nether spring was too small. It was far from enough to heal his organs that had been damaged by the heavenly flame. Actually, we can try to open the last 2 gates. Perhaps there will be a way to solve your body's problem, suggested the ghost lady. There were 7 gates in the Yin tomb, and this heavenly tome was only ranked 5th. That meant there was something even more incredible behind the last 2 gates. There's no need. Ningchen shook his head and continued. Right now, no one knows when the 2 tombs will switch between life and death, when it will start, when it will end, and if there's a pattern to it. Furthermore, the 4 gatekeepers that have appeared this time are monsters that can't be killed. If a Xiantian realm existence comes out of the last 2, we won't even have a chance to escape. But your injuries? The ghost lady was a bit worried. It's fine. With this underworld spring, the yellow spring's flower's poison won't spread for now. It's actually pretty good to have an undying body. The heavens have already treated me well, said Ningchen with a faint smile. The people of the underworld never believe in the heavens, sighed the ghost lady. Actually, I don't believe in it either. Ningchen smiled. All right, now that you have the heaven and earth scrolls, you should try to break through to the Xiantian realm. I'm fine for now, so don't worry. The ghost lady nodded. Be careful. I might be in seclusion for a long time this time. If there's nothing important, don't leave the underworld. Ningchen smiled and didn't reply. Half a day later, the ghost lady entered seclusion in the deepest part of the underworld. She sealed off the surrounding 5 kilometers and wouldn't come out until she reached the Xiantian realm. That night, Ningchen left in the ghost sedan chair. When he stepped into one of the Grand Xia cities, he heard the most shocking news. Yang City had been breached. More than half of the 90,000 Imperial Army soldiers had died. The Red training camp had been completely annihilated, and less than 10,000 Azure Sparrow camp soldiers were left. Just 2 days ago, Northern Meng, who had been using the strategy of exhausting the enemy, suddenly launched a large-scale attack on Yang City. Left with no choice, the 90,000 Imperial Army soldiers and 40,000 city guards all went into battle to defend the city. However, something unexpected happened. After Northern Meng's army, more than 1,000 catapults were transported to the front of the city. They lined up in a row and crazily threw huge black pots into the city. No one would have thought that these black pots would become the nightmare of the Grand Xia's Imperial Army and city guards. After the pots broke, black water flowed out and continuously spread. No one knew what this black water was. It was only when the sky was filled with fire arrows that the nightmare truly began. The black water started to burn crazily. Once a person came into contact with it, the fire could no longer be extinguished. He would be burned alive. The black water couldn't flow out of the city walls, and could only flow into the city. The fire also spread rapidly along with the pots that were continuously thrown into the city. It couldn't be stopped. The fire in Yang City burned for an entire day. It could be seen clearly from 100 kilometers away. Yang City was in a miserable state. The Imperial Army had suffered heavy casualties and lost the city walls. In the battle that happened 1 day later, they were defeated again. In this battle, Northern Meng also suffered heavy casualties. Their army of 250,000 was reduced to less than 200,000. However, the most important 100,000 steel cavalry and 10,000 heavy cavalry suffered very few casualties. Compared to the importance of the outcome of this battle, this price was completely acceptable. Under the night sky, the ghost sedan chair streaked across the night sky and rushed towards the north. 2 hours later, Ningchen arrived at Yang City. Looking at the scorched earth, his heart was abnormally heavy. At a corner of the city wall, there were still some remnants of armor that hadn't been completely burned. Ningchen went forward and picked up a piece of armor. Immediately, his expression changed drastically. Crude oil. Chapter 166. The shock in Ning Chen's heart was unparalleled. The ghost palanquin swept past and rushed towards Jialing City. Crude oil was discovered very early in the history of Wuxia, but it was only used in modern times. One of the reasons was that these things were usually buried deep underground and not easy to extract. When he came to this world, he tried his best to avoid the appearance of things that surpassed the era. Every era had its own specific path of civilization, and he didn't want to destroy it casually. Things like gunpowder and crude oil, once they appeared in war, they would destroy the balance and cause more destruction. Great Xia had crude oil. This was something he knew long ago. However, he wasn't too worried. After all, many changes in thinking couldn't be done overnight. Just like the appearance of gunpowder in Wuxia, it was only used to make firecrackers in the beginning. When someone thought of using it in war, it was unknown how many years later it would be. It wasn't rare for ordinary people to discover this thing. In the past, Wuxia was even discovered and recorded in the Eastern Han Dynasty. However, discovery and use were two different things. From the Eastern Han Dynasty to the use of crude oil, it took more than 1,000 years. When it was used in war, it was only close to 100 or 200 years. Simply put, people's thinking and knowledge were limited. Just like the Marquis of Great Xia, he almost didn't have the chance to see these things with his own eyes. Even if he occasionally heard about it, he wouldn't take it to heart, let alone use it in war. And the people who discovered crude oil weren't at the level of Marquis, so it was even more impossible for them to think in this direction. The ghost palanquin came to Jialing City. A few days ago, Northern Ming launched a surprise attack and took down this city. During those days, he was unconscious in the underworld and didn't know about this news. Jialing City was close to a mountain, and its geographical location wasn't important. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be the target of Northern Ming's attack. After Ning Chen came to the city, he didn't stop at all, and directly rushed to the several camps where Northern Ming's army had been stationed in the past. The campsite required for a 250,000-strong army was enormous. Ning Chen checked for nearly 2 hours, and finally found some unusual signs. In the camp closest to Mount Li, wheel marks were 1 inch into the ground. Obviously, they had pulled something very heavy. Ning Chen followed the marks into the mountain. At the place with the most wheel marks, he saw a huge gully. The crude oil didn't flow much. Obviously, the surface part had been extracted. After looking at it, Ning Chen had a rough understanding of the situation. Without a doubt, Fan Lingyue already knew that there was crude oil here, which was why he didn't fire anywhere else but here. He had seen the crude oil residue in Jialing City before. It was different from the crude oil here. It flowed much better. Obviously, it had been processed simply. It wasn't surprising that Fan Lingyue knew that Jialing City had crude oil. After all, this wasn't a secret. Furthermore, Jialing City definitely wasn't the only place with crude oil in Grand Xia. If they sent more people to investigate and inquire, they would surely find something. However, just like what he said, discovering it and using it were two different things. Fan Lingyue discovered it and used it, becoming a calamity for Grand Xia. Although the might of crude oil was far more than that, Fan Lingyue had already used it in the war, when no one took it seriously. Ning Chen felt a little helpless. If it was him, without the memories of the later generations, it was very likely that he wouldn't have thought of this step. War had its own knowledge, such as weapons, armors, and catapults. Before seeing the shocking scene of Jialing City being burned down, who would have thought that this ordinary-looking black water would have such great power? This battle was going to be difficult. Ning Chen sighed. After this defeat, the morale of Grand Xia would definitely fall to the lowest point. Defeat wasn't something that could be broken. What was terrifying was the continuous defeat. Ever since Great Xia and Northern Ming started fighting, Great Xia had never won, and had always been defeated. First, it was the crushing defeat at Beijiang Plains. Then Yingui City was broken. Then it was the crushing defeat of Marquis Taiping's army. Next, it was Heaven's Gate that was broken. Today, Jialing City was broken. This time, even the most elite imperial guards of Great Xia were defeated. The soldiers and commoners of Great Xia might very well have the thought that Great Xia might really not be able to defeat Northern Meng. Great Xia really couldn't defeat Northern Meng. This was something that absolutely no one would believe before the start of the war. However, today, not only others, but even the commoners of Great Xia had started to believe this fact. The invincible Great Xia had really become a thing of the past. Everyone had overlooked a fact. Actually, in this battle of defending the city, the Imperial Guards of Great Xia had done well. Apart from being stunned by Northern Meng's sneak attack at the start and suffering heavy casualties, in the battle of defending the city a day later, even without the protection of the city walls, they still showed strong combat strength. In the final battle, Northern Meng lost close to 60,000 soldiers. However, the number of Imperial Guards that died in this battle was less than half of Northern Meng's. Northern Meng had an overwhelming advantage in numbers. Breaking the city was inevitable, and no one could stop them. Unfortunately, Yiyang City was broken into such a pitiful state that no one would notice this fact. Fan Lingyue was a terrifying person. He knew how to scheme and scheme. He used the lives of 60,000 Northern Meng soldiers to open a path out of the city. After this battle, less than 10,000 soldiers were left defending the city. More than half of the 90,000 Imperial Guards were lost. The Red Training Camp was wiped out, and the Green Sparrow Camp was basically destroyed. Of the three camps, only one was left. Along with Yiyang City being broken, it was a huge blow to their morale. 60,000 Northern Meng soldiers in exchange for Yiyang City, and the fear of the entire Great Xia, was definitely worth it. Furthermore, Northern Meng's most important 100,000 iron cavalry and 10,000 heavy cavalry were perfectly fine. This was the true nightmare of Great Xia. Simply put, after this battle, Great Xia was in danger. The fall of a country was no longer a joke. Instead, it was a huge problem that everyone in the Emperor dynasty had to face. Weiyang Palace, Heavenly Mandate Hall, and Grand Scholar's Manor. After the three most powerful people in Great Xia received the news of Yiyang City falling, they all fell into silence. Xia Mingri's brows were locked tight. He had already listened to Ning Chen's suggestion. If they could not win, they should try their best to drag it out until autumn. Who knew that even if Great Xia defended, they would still lose time after time. They could not win and could not defend. That advisor of Northern Meng was so strong that it exceeded their expectations. Great Xia was in a passive state. If this continued, they would really be wiped out. The assassinations in the Imperial City continued to occur every few days. With the death of the third prince, apart from the advisor of Northern Meng, no one knew how many people there were. The nobles in the Imperial City were anxious every day, afraid that they would be the next to die. The Imperial Guards of the 6 camps were patrolling day and night, trying their best to find the assassins. However, the Imperial City was too big. Previously, they had borrowed the power of the third prince to sneak into the city. It was easier said than done to find them again. In Weiyang Palace, Zhang Sun stood in front of the window and looked at the night sky. She had a complicated expression and did not speak for a long time. Qing Ming stood at the side and did not say a word, silently waiting. They also did not expect Great Xia to lose again. One Fan Lingyue had almost destroyed Great Xia. Just half a year ago, Great Xia was still the invincible dynasty. Today, who dared to say such words? There were no excuses or excuses. They just could not win. If only he was here. Qing Ming sighed softly. In this world, the only person who could compete with the military advisor of Beimeng was Ning Chen. There was no lack of smart people in Great Xia. However, the thinking of these two people had always exceeded everyone else by a large margin. They could no longer be described as simply smart. Zhang Sun looked out of the window and said slowly, "He has already sacrificed too much for Great Xia. If not for him, Great Xia would not have lasted until now. Let's leave the rest to fate." Hearing this, Qing Ming sighed again and did not speak. Outside Jialing City, Ning Chen did not stay for long. After a simple inspection, he left in the ghost sedan. Northern Meng had broken through an important defensive line of Great Xia. Now, it was up to Duke Jingwu and the rest to deal with it. He had stayed in the underworld for too long. His understanding of the war was only at the surface level. He was not clear about many details, and could not think of a solution for a while. It was getting late. He had to go back as soon as possible. The ghost sedan flew past the north of Great Xia. Before dawn, he finally rushed back to the underworld. Ning Chen did not know if he would have a chance to see the light of day again in this life. However, there was always hope to survive. He could not go out during the day. Fortunately, he had obtained a piece of netherworld spring. He did not have to worry about the spread of the poison of the underworld flower, and could try to cultivate. At first, Ning Chen did not dare to be careless. He carefully circulated traces of vital energy in his body. When he felt that there was no change in his body, he tried to circulate more vital energy. However, when Ning Chen circulated 1/3 of his vital energy, the poison of the underworld flower showed signs of spreading again. Clearly, it had reached the limit of the netherworld spring. Ning Chen sighed. He had to give up temporarily. It seemed that the netherworld spring in his body was not enough to support his cultivation. Since he could not cultivate the scroll of life and scroll of earth, Ning Chen could only try to cultivate the scroll of heaven that he obtained from the Yin tomb. That golden page was with the ghost girl. However, he had memorized the mental cultivation method. Now, instead of carefully circulating the scroll of life and scroll of earth, he might as well try the scroll of heaven that he had no foundation in. Like the scroll of earth, the moves of the scroll of heaven could only be cultivated after reaching the Xiantian realm. Among all the heavenly books, except for the scroll of life, the rest did not focus on mental cultivation methods. The most important part was the few moves that were recorded after the mental cultivation method. Unfortunately, he could not cultivate them. The advantages and disadvantages of the heavenly books were very obvious. The scroll of life only had the mental cultivation method, and basically no moves. Although he could cultivate the only move, it was frighteningly difficult. He estimated that he would not be able to cultivate it even if he practiced for another 10 years. As for the scroll of earth and scroll of heaven, only after reaching the Xiantian realm could he find out what was so special about them. After a while, faint blue lights lit up in the underworld. They were very weak, like fireflies in the dark, about to be extinguished at any time. Ning Chen cultivated the scroll of heaven for an entire day. Traces of vital energy gathered in his dantian, like a newborn baby, slowly but clearly growing. Chapter 167. The bright moon hung high in the sky and the night was enchanting. After a day of traveling, the northern Ming army stopped and set up camp. Fan Lingyue got off his horse and looked at the approaching Grand Xia's imperial city. The fatigue in his eyes grew stronger. Coughing sounds came one after another and blood stained his palm. Fan Lingyue glanced at it, and his expression was as calm as ever. Half a year had passed since the war started. The current situation seemed to be in Northern Ming's favor, but the truth was not as simple as it seemed. Northern Ming's greatest disadvantage was that they had no reinforcements. They had fought too deeply, and the reinforcements from the Northern Ming imperial court would not be able to rush over in a short time. Moreover, even if Northern Ming's cavalry broke through Grand Xia's imperial city, there were still many things to deal with. For example, the 300,000 soldiers that she had blocked outside Heaven's Gate, and the reinforcements that were constantly gathering in Grand Xia. Unfortunately, she did not have that much time. The only thing she could do was to defeat Grand Xia while she was still alive. As for the future, Mingyu had to walk it himself. She believed that Mingyu could walk it well. She had watched Mingyu grow up and had stayed by his side for so long. He would not lose to anyone. She believed that Northern Ming would become stronger and stronger in Mingyu's hands. Under the night sky, the coughing sounds became more and more intense. Blood dripped from his fingers onto the ground and dyed Grand Xia's soil red. In the barbarian king's palace, a figure was kneeling on the ground, waiting for the king's orders. Follow him secretly. The barbarian king stood in the hall with a complicated expression. Yes. The figure received the order and immediately disappeared. In the southern border of Grand Xia, a beautiful woman was walking on Grand Xia's soil, searching as she walked. He was definitely not dead. But where was he? A man looked around in confusion, not knowing where to go. The vast Grand Xia was frighteningly large. A man walked day after day, searching for the figure in her heart. In the underworld, Ning Chen knew nothing about this. Perhaps he would occasionally think of that beautiful woman from the barbarian dynasty. But most of the time, it would just flash by and be replaced by national affairs. No matter what era it was, between a man and a woman, the woman's heart would always be filled by the other party. At most, the man would only think of that gentle smile when he was tired. Fairness between men and women had always been unrealistic since ancient times. Because of the difference in effort, women had sacrificed too much, while men had gained too much. There was no doubt that Ning Chen liked a man, but perhaps even he himself didn't know if liking and love were the same thing. In the underworld, Ning Chen only woke up on the 7th day. Inside his dantian, 2 extremely small cyclones were slowly rotating. Compared to the scroll of life and scroll of earth, they were still very weak. However, they could be considered to be in the initial stages of solidification. That day, during his battle with Eunuch Pei, he had shattered one of the cyclones in his body and temporarily gained the strength to fight against a Xiantian expert. If he wanted to regain it now, it would not be as easy as cultivating the Heaven Scroll. He could not continue cultivating the Life Scroll and the Earth Scroll. He could only cultivate the Heaven Scroll and the martial arts of the Zhangsun lineage that he had destroyed. The underworld spring within his body could only support a third of his true qi. Before the Heaven Scroll and the Zhangsun lineage's 2 cyclones grew stronger, he didn't need to worry. Outside the underworld, the Grand Xia situation was still as passive as ever. Forced to move out 2 more battalions, the remaining 40,000 soldiers in Yang City and the 2 battalions in Xiling City, a total of 160,000 soldiers, were split into 2 groups to help each other. They had to stop the advance of the northern Ming cavalry as soon as possible. The various forces of the Grand Xia were also moving to the north. Other than the loyal Marquis, who was fighting against the Minyang Empire in the southeast, and the Blackwater Army, who was fighting against the Eternal Night cult in the west, the rest of the reinforcements were all moving north. Moving reinforcements required time. Right now, the most important thing was whether or not these forces in the north could delay the northern Ming cavalry before the reinforcements arrived. Within the Grand Xia's imperial palace, a ghost palanquin drove past. The patrolling dragon guard immediately went up to stop it. "It's me." Ning Chen got off the palanquin in his wheelchair and took out the dragon guard talisman. "Marquis Wu." All the dragon guards immediately knelt down and respectfully bowed. "Get up. Take me to see His Majesty," Ning Chen said calmly. Everyone got up and split into 2 sides. An imperial guard leader led the way in front, not daring to even breathe loudly. This was the newly appointed leader of the Dragon Guards. He had heard of the Marquis Jiming's reputation. Meeting him today, even though he was dressed in black, he still felt an indescribable pressure. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. The Marquis Jiming's reputation in the Grand Xia was too great. It could be said that the current Emperor Xia was single-handedly promoted by the Marquis Jiming. In the Heavenly Mandate Palace, Xia Mingyue got off the dragon throne and looked at the figure in front of him with a complicated expression. In the Grand Xia, the person in front of him was the person he wanted to see the most, but also the person he didn't want to see the most. It wasn't that the emperor was narrow-minded, but that such a person would destroy the balance of power of the emperor. However, he knew that Ning Chen was not greedy for power. He was willing to sacrifice for the Grand Xia again and again, because he valued relationships. Everyone in the world thought that the Marquis Jiming was a cruel and heartless person. At first he also thought so. Later he realized how ridiculous this thought was. The Weiyang Palace was the biggest weakness of the person in front of him, but also the place he couldn't touch the most. He had his own mother, but after ascending the throne, he also didn't dare to neglect the person in the Weiyang Palace. "Come back and help me," Xia Mingri said seriously. Ning Chen shook his head gently and said, "I can't be out for too long. I have to leave before dawn. I'm just here to remind your majesty that it's almost time for the wheat grains to ripen." If you want to know the route of the northern Ming army, you can start from there. Hearing this, Xia Mingri was stunned and asked, but according to the report of the spies, the northern Ming army still has enough food. There's no need to prepare for it in the short term. This will depend on Jingwu Duke's ability. The northern Ming army has always been heavily guarded. However, after the battle at Yiyang City, the northern Ming army also lost a lot of people. Apart from 100,000 cavalry and 10,000 heavy cavalry, they only have 80,000 soldiers left. The northern Ming cavalry can run very fast, but the remaining 80,000 can't run that fast. At this point, Ningchen thought for a while and continued, as for the black oil in Yiyang City, Your Majesty doesn't need to worry. Just let the spies keep an eye on it. This kind of surprise attack can only be used once. If it really appears in the northern Ming army, just send a martial arts expert to burn it. This kind of thing is easy to burn and will spread quickly. At that time, the northern Ming army will be the ones to suffer. However, with the intelligence of the northern Ming military advisor, he shouldn't make such a mistake. Xia Mingyue listened seriously and didn't miss a single word. After Ningchen finished, he asked, do you have any way to deal with the northern Ming's heavy cavalry? This was a huge problem for the Great Xia. The western and northern battlefields of the Great Xia had been turned upside down by these heavy cavalry. Yes, but it will be very difficult, Ningchen said slowly. What do you need? Xia Mingri asked. 30,000 cavalry. The rest can't be explained in a few words. I will write down the specific methods in detail. However, there is one thing to note. Even if these cavalry are trained, they must be separated from the northern Ming's heavy cavalry. Otherwise, they won't have any chance, Ningchen replied. Xia Mingri nodded and said, thank you. After explaining everything, Ningchen didn't stay any longer and said, Your Majesty, I still have something to do. I will take my leave first. After saying this, Ningchen turned his wheelchair and walked towards the palace. Behind him, Xia Mingri sighed softly. His mood was even more complicated. Fortunately, there was still a Marquis Jiming in the Great Xia. Otherwise, who could contend with the military advisor of the northern Ming? Jiming Marquis' manor. Ningchen returned. Now the Marquis' manor was no longer as lively as it used to be. In Weiyang Palace, although the two from the Heavenly Mandate Palace had been trying their best to maintain the Marquis' manor, it was only a matter of time before it fell. Lu Ruoxi still stayed in the Marquis' manor. This beautiful courtesan had already regarded the Marquis' manor as her home. No matter how the manor changed, she would not leave. Ningchen sat in his wheelchair and walked into the backyard. The huge backyard was empty and lifeless. Little Mingyu's room was empty. The little girl who used to pester him to tell her stories had now returned to the northern Ming imperial court and continued to be the emperor. In the past, he always felt that little Mingyu was too clingy. Now, without the little girl by his side, he always felt that something was missing. He had taught her to be benevolent and love the people. He also taught her to be decisive. He believed that Mingyu would become a good emperor. The era of Mingyu would always pass. The future of the northern Ming and the Great Xia would be decided by Mingyu's generation. Marquis, is that you? At this moment, outside the door, a soft voice asked with a bit of nervousness. Ningchen turned around and looked at the beautiful figure at the door. A touch of warmth flashed in his eyes as he said, It's me. Hearing this familiar voice, Lu Ruoxi's eyes suddenly became moist and tears unconsciously flowed down. After not seeing her for a month, Lu Ruoxi had lost a lot of weight, and her beautiful face had a bit of sickly weakness. Come here and push me around the courtyard, Ningchen said with a smile. Compared to the other women he knew, Lu Ruoxi was undoubtedly the weakest. She had no background, no strength, and even needed to rely on a man to survive. In fact, most women in the world were like this. It was just that the women he had met before were too powerful. For example, Qing Ming, Xia Miaoyu, Su Fian and Fan Lingyue. However, there was only one Fan Lingyue in the world. Most people were still ordinary people. He had never thought of changing Lu Ruoxi. Being an ordinary person was good enough. She could live a peaceful life and not be involved in the storms of the outside world. Marquis, are you going to leave this time? Lu Ruoxi asked. Ning Chun was silent. After a moment he softly said, I came back to take a look. Lu Ruoxi understood what he meant. Her expression darkened, and she no longer spoke. Chapter 168. The two of them walked around the manor for a long time. Ning Chun looked at the familiar yet unfamiliar manor, his mind filled with many thoughts. Unknowingly, he had been in this world for a year. Too many things had happened in this year. They seemed to be right in front of him, but when he thought about it carefully, they seemed so far away. Great Xia went from its peak to its decline. Emperor Xia died, and the world attacked Great Xia. This 1,000-year dynasty declined so quickly. In just a year, it had fallen to a precarious state. Great Xia being able to hold on for 1,000 years was already a miracle. In Chinese history, other than the distant Zhou dynasty, no other dynasty could last for more than 500 years, let alone 1,000 years. Great Xia's exhaustion had already shown signs. Just like the chaos of the 7 cities, he still didn't think that it was something that Prince Yu could do. However, this matter had happened a long time ago, and he didn't want to investigate it anymore. Many historical truths would eventually be buried in the darkness. Now that a new emperor had ascended the throne and the dust had settled, there was no point in investigating many things. Perhaps Great Xia still had more internal problems that hadn't appeared, but it was no longer important. Great Xia's decline was coincidental, but it was also inevitable. However, Fan Lingyue's appearance brought this day forward by 10 years, 100 years, or even 1,000 years. Living in the same era, as such a person was both fortunate and unfortunate. He didn't know whether Great Xia would fall or not, but he would try his best to stop it. As for the result, it wasn't something that he could decide. Fan Lingyue's greatest intelligence was that he was good at borrowing the power of the situation. There was a limit to a person's strength, and no matter how smart he was, he couldn't predict everything. However, as long as he grasped the situation and guided it, he could adjust the remaining details as needed. Great Xia's 1,000 years had buried too many hidden dangers. In this world, there weren't many people who would help others in need, but there were many who would kick them when they were down. Great Xia occupied the rich land of the Central Plains, and if possible, everyone wanted to take a bite out of it. Great Xia's strength was undeniable. Just Beimeng or Eternal Night Cult alone wouldn't be a match for Great Xia. However, if the two sides worked together, it was enough to go against the invincible Great Xia. As for the desolate city, Dewey Temple, and the internal strife of Great Xia, they were all the result of Fan Lingyue's actions. Since the start of the war between the two dynasties, Great Xia had used up too much strength, due to various internal and external reasons. Only when they officially fought with Beimeng did they realize that they did not have enough strength. Ning Chun was clear that Great Xia had lost their best chance, and every battle in the future would be even more difficult. Under the bright moon, the two of them walked back to the inner courtyard. Ning Chun looked around, and took one last look at the familiar manner of the Marquis. He said softly, "It's getting late. I still have to visit someone. Let's go." Lu Ruoxi's eyes darkened as she let go of the wheelchair, and silently stepped aside. Ning Chun didn't say anything else. He summoned the ghost palanquin and left. Looking at the ghost palanquin gradually disappearing into the distance, Lu Ruoxi mustered up her courage, and shouted with all her strength, "Marquis, if you have time, come back to the mansion more often." The words he shouted echoed throughout the mansion. Unfortunately, the people who were far away could no longer hear him. Or perhaps they heard him, but they didn't reply. The most difficult thing to repay in the world was love, because it was not something that could be repaid with hard work. It was just like how some people spent their entire lives trying to love someone, while others tried their best to forget someone. The will of the heavens was always playing tricks on people, and it was rare for it to be fulfilled. No one knew where love came from, but it went deeper. Hard work couldn't get it, and it couldn't get rid of it. Lu Ruoxi turned around and returned to her room. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer, and they fell like rain. Ning Chun left decisively without any hesitation. His heart was like steel. In the Hao manor, the ghost palanquin came and shook off all the guards. Everyone leave. Xiazi walked out and said, yes. The guards retreated and made way for the two of them. Ningchen got out of the palanquin and looked at the man in front of him. How have you been? How have you been? Xiazi replied, I'm sorry for what happened before. Ningchen said seriously. Xiazi was silent for a moment before he said, you didn't do anything wrong. You don't need to apologize to me. The result of that night was already the best. Great Xia could not afford to have the risk of a second coup to force him to abdicate. Hearing this, Ningchen sighed in his heart. He knew very well that if it weren't for his arrow, Great Xia might have had another Xiantian expert. It wasn't easy to enter the Xiantian realm. If he failed once, the next attempt would be even more difficult. He didn't expect that Xiazi would risk his life to block that arrow for the third prince. He also didn't expect that Xiazi would enter the Xiantian realm at that moment. Unfortunately, that arrow changed everything. The night was intoxicating, and the gentle wind carried a faint chill. When it blew on the body, it was slightly cold. Have you gone to see Mother? Xiazi asked. No. Ningchen shook his head. If you have time, then go. Mother hasn't left Weiyang Palace since your accident. Xiazi sighed. Ningchen was silent and didn't reply. It wasn't that he didn't want to go, but that he didn't dare to. His eldest grandson was the person he respected the most in this world. Even when he got into big trouble in the past, he wasn't this afraid. At most, he would be scolded, but this time was different. How could he dare to go in his current state? Xiazi saw Ningchen's hesitation and said, I don't know what happened to you after that day, but since you're still alive, you should go and report your safety. Let's wait a little longer. Ningchen smiled tiredly and declined. Things weren't as simple as he thought. If he didn't go, Zhang Sun would know that he was still alive. Although he was worried, he didn't need to be afraid. If he went, then the truth would be revealed. At that time, Zhang Sun wouldn't be able to accept it. Xiazi didn't try to persuade him anymore. He walked into the room, and soon came out with 2 jugs of wine. Here. Xiazi threw a jug to him, then opened the lid and drank a mouthful. Ningchen smiled, and took off the black cloth covering his face. He also opened the lid and drank a mouthful. His face, which used to be delicate and pretty, had now been burned and corroded into a completely different appearance. Xiazi glanced at him and didn't say anything. He continued to drink the wine. Wine was the best thing to drown one's sorrows. It had been intoxicating since ancient times. A few days ago, when Xinyu was helping Mother with her makeup, she noticed that a lot of Mother's hair had turned white. Unknowingly, Mother also started to grow old, Xiazi said as he drank. Ningchen was silent. He drank the wine one mouthful at a time. He didn't feel anything. It was as if he was drinking water. Actually, Mother really hoped that you and Xinyu could be together. Unfortunately, in the end, you still didn't agree, Xiazi continued. Feelings can't be forced, Ningchen said as he drank a mouthful of wine. He had always believed that love was a matter between 2 people, and not a matchmaker's word from their parents. This was the biggest conflict between him and this world. It was also the only thing that he couldn't compromise on. The 2 of them drank more and more wine. They emptied jugs one after another. However, it wasn't that easy for a 9th-rank martial artist to get drunk. When the sky was about to brighten, Ningchen left. He sat on the ghost palanquin and returned to the underworld. An hour later, Xiazi also stood up. He waved his hand to disperse the alcohol in his body and walked toward the imperial palace. Ascension Valley was on the eastern side of the Grand Xia. It was close to the edge of the continent. It was an unknown place with picturesque mountains and rivers. A large waterfall fell from the sky, splashing water 30 meters into the air. The mist was hazy and birds sang. It was like a paradise on earth. Outside Ascension Valley, a figure slowly walked over. Behind him was a simple sword rack. There were 5 different swords on it. Each step he took was the same distance, the same speed, and the same precision. In the Divine Continent, there were very few descriptions of Ascension Valley. This was a truly unknown place. There were far too many secrets buried within. When Prince Yan walked in, He immediately felt a strong pressure coming at him. Unfamiliar expert. This is not a place you should have come to. A cold voice rang out from the depths of the valley warning him. I've come to ask for a drop of phoenix blood, said Grand Prince Yen calmly. Impossible. Please leave, replied the cold voice. Then I'll go get it myself, said Grand Prince Yen indifferently. How dare you? An angry voice came from the depths of Ascension Valley. The next moment, a rumbling sound came from the horizon. The wind and clouds changed. A huge palm formed and slammed down. Grand Prince Yen was not afraid at all. He clenched his fist and a red sword flew out. It slashed the sky and scattered the wind and clouds. Rumble! The ground shook and cracked. A powerful aura filled the endless yellow soil. It was cold and dark. It was as if it did not belong to this world. A decaying body rushed out of the darkness. The power buried deep in Ascension Valley could not bear it any longer and walked out. The moment it appeared, the world suddenly darkened. The murky aura of impending death was bone-chilling. It was abnormally terrifying. It filled the world and made the sky turbid. The figure in the gray fog opened its eyes. The aura of death was so thick that it could not be dissolved. There was no trace of life. Most of the old monsters were buried in their coffins, but they were frightening. The space shook again and again, unable to contain their existence. Whoosh! Rain fell from the gray sky. The road started to become muddy. Gradually, a second figure climbed out of the ground, followed by a third, a fourth. There were 7 figures in a row. They were all shrouded in gray fog. The aura of death connected to the sky. They were facing off against the legendary figures of the Xia dynasty. Their auras were at their peak. The sky became darker and darker. Not a single ray of sunlight could penetrate. 7 Xiantian lords, a terrifying lineup. This was the hidden trump card of the unknown lands. At this moment, they finally bared their bloody fangs. The 7 figures were peerlessly terrifying. They stood there like an endless black hole, devouring everything around them. In the next moment, a strange phenomenon appeared behind the 7 of them. A black ocean evolved with raging waves that reached a height of 300 meters. Stars fell one after another, but they couldn't even make a splash. This was a sea of death that annihilated all life. Once one fell into it, they would never be able to climb out for all eternity. Grand Prince Yen was as calm as usual. He waved his hand, and a green sword appeared. Suddenly, green and red reflected each other. The sword light broke through the void. Chapter 169. When the 7 Khanate experts worked together, their power was earth-shattering. A black ocean trapped the sky and covered the stars. It was terrifying. Prince Yen held the green and red swords in his hands. One of them was covered in frost, while the other was covered in heat waves. He fought against the 7 without being at a disadvantage. In the Ascension Valley, the sky and earth were in turmoil. The collapse of the ground continued to spread. This was the most terrifying battle in the world. 8 Khanate experts working together was unimaginable. Among the 7 living fossils, there was no lack of old monsters in the 5th calamity. They were about to go through the 3 calamities. Their power was immeasurable. Prince Yen was not in a hurry. He waved his sword, stabbing, pointing, chopping, waving, and slashing. Every move was ordinary, but terrifyingly accurate. The 7 people's attacks were stuck in a quagmire. The more they fought, the more shocked they became. No matter how fierce their attacks were, they could not go any further under the sharpness of the green and red swords. They could feel that the stranger in front of them had not reached the 3 calamities realm, but his combat power was indeed terrifying. The 2 swords' attributes were completely opposite. The 7 people had a hard time dealing with them. Plus, their emotions changed. Eventually, a flaw appeared. Green and red breath at the same time, absolute chi. Prince Yen waved his swords faster. Streaks of green and red swords flew out, breaking through the gap between the 7 people. In that instant, Prince Yen's figure flashed rapidly. He waved his sword, and his green robe disappeared. When he reappeared, the sword light was like lightning. Boom, boom, boom. He waved his sword 7 times. The 7 people flew backward and landed on the ground. They vomited red blood and were seriously injured. Prince Yen sheathed his sword and strode into the valley. The powerful and unshakable power made the 7 people unable to stand up. Not only were they injured, but they were also shocked. Stranger, are you trying to provoke the anger of the Ascension Valley? Deep in the valley, the cold voice threatened again. Is it serious? Prince Yan's expression did not change. He said lightly. As soon as he finished speaking, the sand sword flew out and turned into a stream of light that shot into the depths of Ascension Valley. In the next moment, the sand sword fell straight down. In a huge explosion, the sky and earth were turned upside down and sand filled the sky. The existence deep in the Ascension Valley was shocked. Then it was furious. A terrifying aura rose. It was about to come out. Don't be rash. At this moment, another voice rang out from the depths of the Ascension Valley. There's no need to lose half your life for a drop of phoenix blood. Give it to him. Phoenix blood is precious. How could it be given away so easily? The voice from before said unwillingly. The bigger picture is more important. Don't bicker over a momentary mistake, someone advised. A drop of dark red phoenix blood flew out from the depths of Ascension Valley and landed in front of Prince Yan. Take it. I will personally settle this debt in the future. Anytime. Prince Yan put away the phoenix blood and said calmly. Since he had achieved his goal, Prince Yan didn't want to stay any longer. He turned around and walked out of the valley. When he passed by the 7 people who were heavily injured, he didn't stop at all. He didn't even look at them. A traitor who was willing to fall in order to live was too pitiful. Looking at the outstanding experts in front of them, a hint of shame flashed in the depths of the 7 people's eyes. Once upon a time, they were also respected experts in the human world. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in the world. They couldn't turn back. Prince Yan left with the phoenix blood. Not long after he left, the sky rolled, and a vast amount of righteous energy appeared. It condensed into an old figure and blocked his path. Prince Yan's expression changed for the first time. He asked, You are? Ji Taisher, the headmaster replied. Prince Yan's eyes flashed. The headmaster was actually still alive. The power of the phoenix blood is too overbearing. Ordinary people can't use it directly. Only the righteous energy of the Confucian sect can neutralize it. Bring Ning Chen to the academy. After he finished speaking, the headmaster's body gradually dissipated and disappeared. Prince Yan stopped and thought for a moment. Then his body flashed, and he turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the distance. 300 miles to the east of the imperial city of the Xia dynasty, banners were flying in the wind, and the hooves of the horses were rumbling. The black mass of the Xia dynasty cavalry was running continuously and getting into formation. They were practicing new battle tactics that had never appeared in the army before. None of the soldiers of the Xia dynasty knew why they were practicing these strange battle tactics. They also didn't know why they had to practice again at night, after they finished practicing during the day. How is it? In the distance, Xia Zi glanced at the person beside him and asked. Ning Chen looked solemnly and thought about every detail. After a long time he replied, If possible, continue to reduce the weight of the horses. Our horses are not as good as those of Beimeng. The horses used by the 10,000 heavy cavalry are the best of the best. We can't be careless and must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Okay. Xia Zi nodded and replied. Ning Chen's eyes were solemn. Now it seemed that there was no problem with the training. However, when it came to a real battle, the effect would depend on the coordination of the generals on the battlefield. Most importantly, they had to think of a way to separate the 10,000 heavy cavalry from Beimeng's 100,000 heavy cavalry. It was impossible for the Xia dynasty cavalry here to deal with Beimeng's heavy cavalry. If they were engulfed by the flood of 100,000 heavy cavalry, they would be devoured in an instant. However, it was easier said than done to separate the Beimeng cavalry from the heavy cavalry under Fan Lingyue's nose. 2 days ago, the barbarian king sent a letter saying that he can borrow 100,000 soldiers to help the Xia dynasty tide over this crisis. Xia Zi suddenly said. Ning Chen was startled and couldn't react for a moment. What did the barbarian king mean by this? He didn't believe that the barbarian dynasty would be so kind. Although the barbarian king had saved him and Qingming once in Nanjiang, that was because of a man. The barbarian king's personal actions had nothing to do with the barbarian dynasty or Great Xia. No matter when, personal feelings and national affairs couldn't be mixed together. What condition? Ningchen asked. The entire Nanjiang, Xiazi replied. Ningchen was speechless. The barbarian king really dared to ask for too much. What did Her Majesty say? Ningchen asked. Her Majesty hasn't decided, and is currently hesitating. She wants me to ask for your opinion, Xiazi replied. Ningchen sighed softly and said, Actually, there's nothing to hesitate about. Ceding land is absolutely out of the question. The Xia dynasty's territory was protected by generations of blood, not to mention the entire Nanjiang. We can't give up even an inch of land. The precedent of ceding land definitely couldn't be set. The bloody lessons of Wuxia's history were still vivid in their minds. Those 100 years of darkness caused Wuxia, which had a civilization of 5,000 years, to lose all of its dignity. Even now it was still paying for the humiliation of those years. Xiazi was silent for a moment before saying, Her Majesty's hesitation is actually understandable. The current situation of Great Xia is indeed not optimistic. The successive defeats have greatly affected the morale of Great Xia's army. Furthermore, the military forces within Great Xia's territory are being restrained too much, especially by the Eternal Night cult. They suddenly have an additional 20,000 heavy cavalry. The Blackwater army and the reinforcements from the various cities are having a hard time resisting them. They need to constantly transfer troops over. Hearing this, Ningchen narrowed his eyes and said, It's not impossible to borrow troops. We can ask His Majesty to send an important envoy to negotiate with them to show Great Xia's sincerity. If possible, Prince Hua would be the best candidate. Since the barbarian king is willing to borrow troops, it means that he has the intention to negotiate. Any deal would be asking for a sky-high price and haggling on the ground. Other than ceding land, all other conditions can be discussed. The barbarian king has a small population and is lacking in resources. What they need the most is not land, but food, spices, and medicinal herbs. Coincidentally, Great Xia has plenty of these things. Moreover, the purpose of sending Prince Hua over is to remind the barbarian king that Great Xia does not have to borrow troops from the barbarian dynasty. Let the barbarian king guess. At this point, Ningchen paused and thought for a moment before continuing. As for True Pole Nation, send someone to inform Princess Miao Yu and cooperate with her to spread some rumors from the palace of True Pole Nation. It doesn't need to be too obvious. For this kind of thing, the more obscure the better. If it's too obvious, it will arouse suspicion. In addition, during the negotiation between the barbarian king and Prince Hua, he will definitely deliberately delay time to make Great Xia anxious. Therefore, we can send Prince Hua over with an imperial edict to set a time limit for the negotiation. With True Pole Nation waiting, the barbarian king won't dare to be too aggressive. Hearing Ningchen's words, Xiazi couldn't help but sigh. If he didn't know that Ningchen was really only 17 years old, he would have suspected that the person beside him was an old fox who had lived for decades. I will tell Her Majesty these words. I just don't know if Fourth Imperial Uncle will have any problems. After all, Father has trapped him for 20 years. Xiazi sighed softly. Ningchen didn't say anything, but he believed that Prince Hua would agree. In the current situation, it was still too early to think about the barbarian dynasty's reinforcements. The outcome of the negotiation between the two dynasties was still unknown. Moreover, even if the barbarian king sent out his troops, it would still take 2 months for the 100,000 barbarian soldiers to arrive in the north of Great Xia. As the saying goes, distant water cannot quench a present thirst. Too many changes could happen in 2 months. In the underworld, Prince Yan walked in and spread out his spiritual sense. However, he couldn't sense Ningchen's aura. He couldn't help but frown. The entire underworld was empty. There wasn't a single person to be seen. Prince Yan continued to walk forward. When he sensed the restrictions in the depths of the underworld, he moved his feet and disappeared. This was the ghost woman's place of seclusion. Everything within a 10-mile radius was sealed. Prince Yan walked forward and touched the restriction. After a slight hesitation, he waved his hand and broke it. There were too many mechanisms and restrictions within a 10-mile radius. Unfortunately, in front of Prince Yan, they were like paper and couldn't withstand a single blow. In less than 15 minutes, all the restrictions outside the ghost woman's stone room were broken. Prince Yan opened the stone door and saw the only person inside. His frown deepened. At this moment, the ghost woman had reached a critical moment in her cultivation. The aura around her was surging. The power of the Ghost Baron, the Earth Scroll, the Sky Scroll, and the Life Scroll that Ning Chun had given her were all sublimated to the extreme. She was constantly trying to break through the Xiantian barrier. Prince Yan's expression was cold. When he sensed the familiar aura of the Life Scroll, a cold, murderous intent flashed across his eyes. The Life Scroll. How could she have the power of the Life Scroll? In the sword rack, the red and green sword sensed Prince Yan's murderous intent and trembled violently. The swords had a sword aura. At this moment, they actually showed signs of flying out of their own accord. Prince Yan pressed his hands on the swords and said slowly, "Wait until dawn." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.